All right. Good morning, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. His Excellency Lee Chi-bom, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Malaysia, Mr. Herizal Hazri, Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Annyeonghaseyo, selamat pagi and good morning. Welcome to the 60 years and beyond, preparing Malaysia-Republic of Korea relations for a new era. A Malaysia Scholars on Korea, better known as MASK, event organized by ISIS Malaysia with the support of the Republic of Korea Embassy in Malaysia. To begin today's proceedings, may I please have the honor of inviting Mr. Herizal Hazri, Chief Executive of ISIS Malaysia, to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Thank you, Farlina. Good morning. Selamat pagi, everyone. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to welcome you to the Malaysia Scholars on Korea network event on 60 years and beyond, preparing Malaysia's Republic of Korea relations for a new era. As some of you might be aware, this is the fourth event held by the MAS network since its establishment 3 years ago, pursuant to the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding between ISIS Malaysia and the Embassy of the Republic of Korea in Malaysia in 2016. Through today, as back then, the MAS network continues to act as a focal point for scholars and researchers in the two respective countries to converse, cooperate, and collaborate across various disciplines such as international relations, security, strategy, economics, language, sustainability, among others. Through the years, MAS network events have explored the intricacies of a Malaysia-Republic of Korea comprehensive strategic partnership, the outcomes of President Moon Jae-in's visit to Malaysia, and possibilities for ASEAN to further its engagement in the Korean Peninsula peace process. On top of that, the network has provided policy perspectives to visiting delegations from Korea and galvanizes members to contribute in forums organized by the MAS network and its ISIS Malaysia and those that are not. Through it all, we are very happy to have had 19 members of the MAS network to share this journey with us, and we thank them for their continued commitment to this network. Building on that, we are also deeply pleased to welcome 6 new members to the MAS network, and I would like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude for their enthusiasm towards deepening Malaysia-South Korea relations. In saying that, it would be remiss if I did not mention the support that we have enjoyed from the Embassy of the Republic of Korea in Malaysia, for whom without these efforts and initiatives would not have come to fruition. Dear colleagues, politically, Malaysia-South Korea diplomatic relations were forged on February 23, 1960, to a background of the state of emergency in the then Malaya and in the aftermath of the Korean War. Both countries were then depicted as the backwaters of Asia, but the successes of both nations since then has far superseded expectations of the 1950s international community. Relations between Malaysia and Korea grew at a steady pace. Early trade relations were characterized by exchanges in raw materials such as logs, crude natural rubber, tin, and palm oil exported from Malaysia to the then protectionist South Korea, who made exceptions for natural resources. As such, some historians say that there is a threat of Malaysia in building the industrialized South Korea today. There are 4 factors that built the foundations and shape relations we see today. The first is stability on the Korean Peninsula that has provided enough security for South Korea to deepen its engagements with the international community beyond its 4 largest partnerships. The second is the Malaysian Look East policy that sought to emulate and engage Japan and Korea. The third, the Korean Wave, that strengthened people-to-people connections between South Korea and different parts of the world, inclusive of Malaysia. And the fourth would be the persistent and earnest engagement under the new Southern policy that has oriented South Korea's views towards Southeast Asia and has benefited not only Malaysia, but other Southeast Asian neighbors such as Vietnam and Indonesia. In addition to the deepening of trade, throughout the 6 decades of relations, the Malaysia-South Korea partnership have materialized in physical structures that are synonymous with Malaysia and Malaysians, such as the Petronas Twin Towers. In East Malaysia, South Korea's Borneo connection, which began with a few South Korean companies in Miri, Sarawak, has grown to efforts of building the smart city of Kota Kinabalu, Sabah. Projected plans of the smart city aims to meet the developmental needs of the capital city of Sabah. Dear colleagues, it is clear that the past 6 decades has established a deep foundation for Malaysia-South Korea relations. And the question before all of us today is, how do we prepare this relationship for the future? Indeed, we have always been doing this. We have always been preparing ourselves for the next phase of Malaysia-Korea cooperation. Areas that we have explored and will continue to expand are the building of Malaysia's strong foundation in halal food products and services, halal tourism, education, and finance, and South Korea's potential in electronics and information and communication technology. These are also in existence with present untapped potentials, such as the ties of South Koreans who have completed their primary or secondary education in Malaysia, who can serve as beacons of connectivity in the future. At the end of last year, there were conversations of a strategic partnership that would evaluate and elevate ties. This would be a hallmark and timely for both South Korea and Malaysia to navigate future challenges. Besides that, while I'm sure that esteemed panelists that we have invited will have more than a few thoughts on the matter, I want to take this opportunity to highlight one specific area that I believe will not only benefit South Korea and Malaysia, but the international community as well. This is for Korea to assist Malaysia in developing our capacity and depth as a responsible partner for international development. I say this today with admiration for what South Korea has managed to achieve in the short span of 6 decades. As some of you will know, Official Development Assistance, or the ODA, was the only source of capital for South Korea following the devastation of the Korean War in the early 1950s. 5 decades later, South Korea ended its dependence on the World Bank's assistance and was excluded from the OECD list of ODA recipients in the year 2000. In 2010, 3 years shy from 6 decades after the end of the Korean War, South Korea became the 24th member of the OECD's Development Assistance Committee. Naturally, this inspires us here in Malaysia. Malaysia's aspiration goes far beyond achieving the status of a high-income nation. We believe Malaysia's real challenge is not when or how long would it take for us to achieve the high-income status. Instead, it is who we are when we arrive there. If there is one thing that the COVID-19 pandemic have taught us, it is that countries must be responsible to collectively achieve sustainable development goals to ensure that our future, the future of our children, is protected. This should rise above all other priorities. For Malaysia to be more active as an international development partner holds a dear place to me, and I hope that this inspires imagination from some of you too. Towards building relations to not last for the next 60 years, but also further development stories of both nations hinges on the need for pragmatic and consistent relations. These are the areas that will be explored in the 2 sessions held today. And I invite panelists, participants, and observers to engage and discuss these issues for us to forge another 60 years of success together. On that note, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hazri. May I now have the pleasure of inviting His Excellency Lee Chi-bom, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Malaysia, to deliver the opening remarks.
Yang berbahagia Mr. Harizal Hazri, dear Mask Network members, distinguished participants, good morning, selamat pagi, dan selamat datang. 안녕하십니까? I would like to first express my sincere gratitude to Chief Executive Yang berbahagia Mr. Harizal Hazri and the Institute of Strategic and International Studies, Malaysia, for organizing today's event. I would like to also thank and extend a warm welcome to the members of the Mask Network and all of you joining us online, including the speakers from Malaysia and Korea. Please allow me to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to ISIS for the launching of the book on our government's New Southern Policy in September this year, and also for publishing a special edition of ISIS Focus on the way forward for the New Southern Policy in November. Although we are already in December, as you all know, this year marks the 60th anniversary of the official diplomatic relations between Malaysia and the Republic of Korea. It is deeply regrettable that many events to commemorate the anniversary could not be held as planned due to the COVID-19. In the midst of this ongoing situation, I am very pleased to hold today's Mask Network event with so many participants, albeit in online webinar format. Distinguished participants, Mask or Malaysia Scholars on Korea Network was first launched in December 3 years ago, right after President Moon Jae-in proclaimed the New Southern Policy in November 2017. Since the launch, Mask Network events were held every year, which makes this the fourth such event. The launch of the Mask Network was perfectly timed, especially in view of the development in ASEAN-ROK and Korea-Malaysia bilateral relations in the last 3 years since the implementation of the New Southern Policy. ASEAN has become the #1 overseas travel destination for Koreans, with more than 10 million visiting the region in 2019. ASEAN is also ROK's second largest trading partner, next only to China, and the largest contractor for Korean construction companies overseas. Likewise, people-to-people exchanges between Korea and Malaysia have grown to over 1 million visitors in 2019. Malaysia is now one of the most popular tourist destinations for Koreans traveling overseas. Bilateral trade between our two countries have also increased close to $20 billion in 2019, placing Malaysia as the 10th largest trading partner for Korea. When compared to the figure in 1965, our bilateral trade volume has multiplied more than 6,000 times. During the same period, Korea-Malaysia bilateral relationship has continued to deepen through high-level visits and summit meetings. President Moon paid a state visit to Malaysia and hosted the ASEAN-ROK commemorative summit in 2019. President Moon and Prime Minister Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin attended the ASEAN Plus 3 Special Summit earlier this year in April. At the same time, efforts were made to enhance and upgrade the New Southern Policy, which culminated in the President Moon Jae-in's unveiling of the New Southern Policy Plus strategy at the ASEAN ROK Summit in November this year. The NSP Plus strengthens and expands the existing policy while taking into account the changes and the new challenges brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. ASEAN leaders all welcomed and expressed support for the NSP Plus strategy. In particular, Prime Minister Muhyiddin expressed his hopes that the mutual beneficial cooperation will further expand through the NSP Plus. Dear MASC members and distinguished participants, even when faced with unprecedented challenges posed by the spread of COVID-19 this year, ASEAN-ROK partnership has become rather strengthened. Indeed, our joint effort to overcome the pandemic deserves special attention. Korea is the first ASEAN dialogue partner to make a substantial contribution to the COVID-19 ASEAN Response Fund. Furthermore, Korea launches various cooperation projects amounting to a total of $34 million in this year alone. They include projects in areas such as human capital development and disaster management. Earlier this year in April, at the ASEAN Plus 3 Special Summit on COVID-19, President Moon Jae-in pledged to provide medical assistance to the ASEAN countries. The Korean government has launched a project titled Enhancing the Detection Capacity for COVID-19 in ASEAN countries. The project provides each of the 10 ASEAN countries with medical supplies and equipment worth a total of $500,000 from the ASEAN-ROK Cooperation Fund. First among the ASEAN countries, we delivered 23,000 COVID-19 tests and swab kits each to Malaysia's Ministry of Health last month. More deliveries of PCR and PPE will soon be on their way. Prime Minister Muhyiddin pointed out at the ASEAN-ROK Summit that Malaysia itself has benefited from Korea's assistance in increasing its COVID-19 testing capacity. As such, Malaysia and Korea are working together even in coping with COVID-19 and expanding the horizon of cooperation in new areas. Against this background, the new Southern Policy Plus strategy highlights the renewed promise and commitment by Korea to continue and further development the cooperation with the ASEAN region. The strategy incorporates the changed environment and new demands, both at home and abroad. Most notable are the trade conflict between major countries and the increased importance of health and medical cooperation due to COVID-19 pandemic. The NSP Plus maintains the vision of a people-centered community of peace and prosperity. The strategy is anchored in 4 principles, which are people-centered, inclusive and shared growth, connectivity, and trust building. The NSP Plus lays out fresh, feasible initiatives centered on the 7 key areas of cooperation or initiatives that will embody detailed and specific plans for actual implementation. First and foremost, the NSP Plus puts forward comprehensive public health cooperation as the top priority in the post-COVID-19 era. It also plans to provide various programs to support education and human resources development. It thereby aims to assist the countries in the region in building the foundation for national development in the long term. The initiative for boosting two-way cultural exchanges to enhance mutual understanding will promote people-to-people exchange. The NSP Plus ultimately aims to nurture comprehensive shared growth with countries in the region by establishing reciprocal and sustainable basis for trade and investment. In addition, the traditional seeks to promote mutual beneficial infrastructure assistance in agricultural and urban development based on Korea's own experience. This initiative is aimed at achieving higher standard of living, reducing regional inequality, and strengthening infrastructure in rural and urban areas. Looking further into the future, the NSP Plus also includes cooperation for co-prosperity in future industries, such as information and communications technology and digital economy. Last, but sure not the least, cooperation in non-traditional security issues will save people's lives and foster safer and peaceful Asian community. The initiative will target common threats such as climate change, natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and damages to the environment. President Moon Jae-in also expressed support for the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework. He hoped that the framework and the NSP Plus together could pave the way for both ASEAN and Korea to enjoy a great prosperity. Distinguished participants, I sincerely hope that everyone joining us here today would continue to show great interest and support for further strengthening the solidarity and cooperation between ASEAN and Korea. Through the new Southern Policy Plus, we can realize the vision of a people-centered community of peace and prosperity. As the Korean ambassador to Malaysia, I will do my best to enhance cooperation between our two countries. I believe that the NSP Plus strategy can also be pursued in harmony with Malaysia's Look East Policy 2.0. My cooperation can further expand not only in promoting trade and investment, but also through mutually beneficial exchanges in other areas, including education, culture, and high technology innovation. Dear MESC members and participants, I am confident that today's event will provide a very timely and meaningful opportunity to review the past and present bilateral relations between Korea and Malaysia. I look forward to many recommendations to make it even better. I also believe that it will be a valuable opportunity to consider ways to best implement the NSP Plus strategy by finding the nexus with the Korea-Malaysia bilateral relations. This afternoon's session 2 will discuss future-oriented cooperation and explore new areas of cooperation. I very much look forward to new areas and untried ideas that will add depth and expand the scope of our bilateral cooperation. Next in today's program is appointment and introduction of new MESC members. I would like to extend my warm welcome and sincere congratulations to the 6 new members. I regret that the certificates cannot be handed out in person as this event is held online only. But I promise to meet you all soon when the conditions improve. Until then, let's stay strong, Malaysia and Korea. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the year 2020 marks the 60th year of relations between Malaysia and the Republic of Korea, known as Wangap. The 60th year marks the completion of the full 60-year calendar or the sexagenary cycle. To commemorate this significant milestone, we wish to celebrate with a short video prepared by the Republic of Korea Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We apologize. I think there was a slight technical error. The sound did not translate very well, but due to the interest of time, perhaps we should actually move on to the group photo. We will have a second video after lunch. Perhaps that would actually have a better sound. Moving on with this morning's program, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we wish to invite the new members of the Malaysia Scholars on Korea Network to briefly introduce themselves, their affiliation and research interests. Thus, in alphabetical order, we wish to invite first Mr. Aaron Dennison. Would it be possible for you to unmute yourself and share and switch your camera on?
Hi, good morning, everyone. It's an honor to join all of you today. So I'm Aaron Dennison. Currently, I am a program officer at the British High Commission in Kuala Lumpur. Previously, I was a research assistant and also a research social officer at the University of Malaya. So basically, my interest in Korean studies has been long since my undergraduate days. So my specific interest on Korean studies is basically on inter-Korean relations and also on Korea-ASEAN relations. So yeah, that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Dennison. May we please have next Professor Brian Bridges?
Okay, can you see me? No. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I'd just like to thank the Embassy, ISIS and the MASC Coordinating Committee for inviting me to join. I'm actually in a kind of semi-retirement in Malacca. I've been in Malaysia now for 6 years. I taught for over 20 years in Hong Kong and I still have some affiliations with universities there. I am very interested initially in Korea's relations with its neighbors, particularly Japan. But in recent years, I've been working on the connection between sport and politics, particularly how this has affected both inter-Korean relations and relations between Korea and other countries. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bridges. Next, would it be possible for me to have Dr. Helena Vaki?
Thank you so much, Ms. Farlina, and thank you as well to the organizing committee and the embassy for inviting me to be part of this network. I'm very happy to be part of it. I'm at the Department of International and Strategic Studies in the University of Malaya. And my main research interest is environmental politics. I mainly look at transboundary haze in Southeast Asia. In terms of my interest with Korea, I'm very interested in doing some, and I have been doing a bit of comparative works on the problems of air pollution in Southeast Asian region as well as the East Asian region. So I'm very interested in trying to pursue more Korean angles for this. So this is how I hope that this connection for me can benefit for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Baki. Next, shall we have Professor Kim Kyun Hyun? Professor Kim Hyun, Professor Kim, you actually have the floor. Perhaps there might be a technical error there. Would it be all right for me to get Professor Ryu Seung-Wan to introduce herself, please? You are on mute. I'm so sorry, Professor.
Thank you, and it's my great pleasure to be a new member. And just now, the Professor Kim told me that she has a connection problem with the Zoom. She usually uses Google, so maybe she'll be connect later. And yeah, my major is in languages, Korean languages, especially in sociology and religion, and then cross-cultural. But at the moment, I joined the National University of Malaysia in 1993. At the moment, I host a post of director of King Sejong Institute in Malaysia. Hopefully that I can contribute in this membership in future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ryu, for actually letting us know about Professor Kim's status. Thus, shall we actually close the new members' introduction with Dr. Zulkifli?
Hi, can you all hear me? Okay. Assalamualaikum, salam sejahtera, selamat pagi, annyeonghaseyo. Well, I don't know how to put this, but my name is Zakri Idris. I'm currently attached to the Management and Science University. I'm teaching international law and a bit of international relations. Part of my interest to join the network and to support the scholarship activities because my interest has always been in international relations. Previously, I had my doctoral degree from the Korea University Graduate School of International Studies. So that's about 5 years of my time in Korea. So yeah, it really feels so good to bring me back to the community that I really had a pleasure before. So that's that. I probably will talk more during the sessions later. And if you allow me just to introduce myself in Korean too, Paulina. 여러분들께 먼저 인사드리겠습니다. 저는 조클이라고 합니다. 앞으로에도 즐거운 시간 같이 보내고 잘 부탁드립니다. A bit nervous.
All right, I see that we've got Professor Kim back. Would it be possible for me to just give you 1 minute or 2 minutes just to introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you very much. Just now I had some technical problem. Okay, first of all, I would like to thank you to Korean Embassy and then ISIS and then MASK to invite me as a new member. I'm very pleased and then very excited to have some research collaboration with all researchers from Malaysia and South Korea. Okay, briefly, I just introduce my research interest. My area is social anthropology, and then currently I'm doing a lot of research on cross-cultural and the intercultural studies. So I have done many researches about, especially from the social and then cultural perspective. For example, recently I have done a comparative study between Felda, Malaysia, and Semaurundong in South Korea. But this one is not economic development, but we want to see what is the cultural impact on the social development and then economic development. And then another, the major research is the K-pop, Korean wave impact on Islamic Southeast Asian countries, because Malaysian society and the Indonesian society, they are quite worried about the detrimental effect of Korean wave on their young people. So this research is mainly funded by the Malaysian government and the Korean government. And then we also have the several research about Lugis policy 2.0. So what is the potential? What is the potential of Lugis policy 2.0, especially in terms of human capital development? So it means when Malaysian government launched the Lugis policy, and then it's been already 38 years. So what Malaysian people have emulated, learned from Korean culture, working culture especially. And then besides that, I'm also doing some research, comparative research on working culture, corporate culture between Malaysian worker and then Korean people who are well known for the hard work. Okay, I think I have to finish here. By the way, I'm working at the University of Malaya, and then I'm working as a head of a Malaysia-Korea Research Center. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Kim, and thank you very much, Dr. Zokri, earlier. So that concludes the introduction of new MAS network members. Moving on with this morning's program, we'll be taking a group photo. We ask for our distinguished role players and network members to switch your cameras on, and if possible, to adopt the official virtual background for the photo session. But I do understand that there can be technical difficulties, so it's all right for us to actually have varied backgrounds. Thus, if it's okay, just switch your cameras on, and we will actually take a quick screen cap of our participants. Sorry, yes. Okay. All right. I think we have actually got everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, MAS network members and distinguished role players. You may now turn off your camera and mute your audio to ensure clarity of bandwidth for our presenters. That concludes the opening ceremony of 60 Years and Beyond, Preparing Malaysia-Republic of Korea Relations for a New Era. Thank you for your participation. And to those joining the session online, thank you for tuning in. We invite you to share your comments and questions via the chat or the Q&A function. Moving to the first panel of the day, may we please invite Dr. Zokri Idris, Deputy Dean of Student Affairs at MSU, to take the floor. Dr. Zokri, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ms. Farlina. Once again, I greet all of you with Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, Salam Sejahtera, and a very pleasant morning to all of you. Now, this is the first session of the event today. The first session is entitled Malaysia, Republic of Korea at 60, Lessons from the Past, Present, and the Assessment for the Future. Now, much has been said on the glorious achievements between these two countries for the past 60 years. We celebrated all of the cooperations and all of the collaborations between Kuala Lumpur and Seoul. But with the current change of the world scenario today, there are lots of disruptions that happen. A legit question arises to all of us, the policymakers or researchers between South Korea and Malaysia relations. What is it that is installed for us in the future? How do we foster this harmonious and good relationship for 60 years to the next 60 years, as eloquently stated by the CEO Encik Hazri just now? So this session this morning is aimed to brainstorm and to highlight what could be the potential collaboration and the strategic directions for both Malaysia and South Korea in the years to come. Obviously, we will also take into considerations the challenges that we had in the past, the issues that we had in the past, and how do we channel these two challenges and issues for a greater cooperation between these two countries in the years to come. Ladies and gentlemen, members of this intellectual floor, I would have the honor to introduce to all of you the speakers for these sessions today. Now, joining with us first is Professor Huang In-won. Professor Huang is currently a professor at the Department of Political Science at Gyeongsang National University, Republic of Korea. Welcome to the forum, Professor. 안녕하세요, 교수님. Next, we have Dr. Lee Jae-hyun. Dr. Lee is a senior fellow at the Center of ASEAN and Oceania Studies at the Asan Institute for Policy Studies of Republic of Korea. Welcome once again, Dr. Lee. And also joining with us today, we have Dr. Hu Chiu-ping. Dr. Hu is a senior lecturer in the Strategic Studies and International Relations program. She's attached to the School of History, Politics and Strategic Studies of National University of Malaysia. And Dr. Hu is also a member, a very senior member of the Malaysia Scholars and Korea Mass Network in Malaysia. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Hu. And assisting me, we have the co-moderator, which is also the MC this morning, Ms. Paulina Said. Ms. Paulina is an analyst at the Foreign Policy and Security Studies at ISIS and also a member of the MAS network. So, ladies and gentlemen, before we start with the presentation, allow me just to run through on the agenda of the discussion today. We will be listening to about 8 to 10 minutes presentation of all of these three speakers. Probably assigned will be ranked and communicated at the 8th minute to indicate that you have probably 2 minutes left. And then when all speakers have probably deliberated their own ideas and presentations, obviously we will open to the floor for any responses, feedback or Q&A, etc. and etc. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to invite Professor Huang In-won, the professor at the Department of Political Science, Gyeongsang National University, to begin with his presentation. Professor, the floor is yours.
Good morning. Thank you for the Malaysian Scholars on Korea Networks for giving me a chance to be a speaker, especially the first speakers. I'm glad to see very familiar faces and names here. So we are facing very terrible situations, but you know that what a wonderful world we can meet on Zoom. Frankly speaking, it was not that simple for me to choose a topic with the relations between Korea and Malaysia. For the last 30 years, my main academic interest was about Malaysian domestic politics. So come to think of it, I myself am not quite familiar with these topics. The topics I choose is about reflections on the 60 years of Malaysia-Korea relations, from low-key relations to good partner for East Asian regionalism. As you can see, my presentation will be quite general, and I think it's boring, but I believe my presentation can be a brainstorming talks for opening today's meaningful seminar. The contents I'm going to present today is about like this: introduction, low-key relations in the early period of bilateral relations, crucial turning point for substantial cooperation, and good partners for East Asian regionalism and mutual relations, toward the second wave of Lugist policy and new Southern policy and beyond. Most of talks have done already by the opening speakers and then welcoming remarks. So please allow me, my talks will be nothing new, but it's kind of short summary of the history of 60 years of the bilateral relations. And from now on, my talk will be a little bit more than 10 minutes, but I'm going to try my best to finish more than 15 minutes. So the Korea and Malaysia started its diplomatic ties in 1960s. Since the beginning, the relationship between the two countries was considered as a generally cooperative and cordial. However, this doesn't mean that there always exists close cooperation. Reflections on the early period of the Korea-Malaysia relations during the 1960s and 70s, political indifference and the lack of economic cooperation characterize the nature of relations. They have viewed each other as neither a significant political nor economic entity of international societies. Rather, both Korea and Malaysia tended to pay their most attention to the relations with other countries, whose collaboration are considered essential for their national security and economic development. After World War II, the common anti-communist experience helped to understand why both countries consider each other as natural friends in the early period of Korea and Malaysia relations. Yet, the common anti-communist stance did not lead to any major or significant bilateral programs. Indeed, relations during this period may be described as correct but ordinary. Following the formal relations, there were a regular visit of high-ranking officials and ministers as usual, but at the non-official level, contact was not particularly outstanding. In the 1970s, Malaysia moved closer to non-aligned members and to pay their great attention to emerging regional groupings, particularly ASEAN. In this context, Malaysia officially recognized North Korea on July 2nd, 1973. In so doing, Malaysia maintained an equidistant stance from both South and North Korea. Okay. During this period, trade and cultural exchange with each other were very also limited. The main reason was that both countries, being small nations, saw their interests tied to major Western powers. In short, Korea and Malaysia pursued cordial ties with each other, but beyond that, had little reason to evolve special relations in the early period of diplomatic ties. The early 1980s was a crucial period in political history of Korea and Malaysia. Both countries experienced important domestic changes. The shifting nature of international relations, especially decreasing importance of political and ideological issues, seems most noteworthy. And given the increasing importance of economic concern in both national and international value systems, significance of newly industrializing East Asian developing economies has remarkably grown. In the meantime, the opening of 1980s coincided with the inauguration of new leadership in Korea and Malaysia. Although the background and general process of leadership change was sharply different between two countries, they shared certain similarities in their political leadership pattern, such as powerful authoritarian style, strong charismatic will to lead the nation for economic development and national well-being. In 1982, Malaysia adopted Look East policy. This policy represented an important shift in Malaysia's overseas trade and economic links. Mahathir decided that Malaysia should shift emphasis from its traditional reliance on the West. As a new prime minister, he was impressed by economic development in East Asia, especially Korea and Japan. He was keen to have these two countries served as a model for Malaysia, and that close trade and investment ties should benefit Malaysia. Some claims that it was Japan that first inspired Malaysia's Look-East policy. However, the inclusion of Korea would offer a wider and more acceptable appearance to Look-East policy. During this period, Korea was also keen to move out of its heavy reliance on traditional trading partners such as Japan and the United States. In May 1980, a retired General Jeon Do-han took over the power at a time of great uncertainty in domestic politics. Then, it was interesting that after making his first overseas trip to the United States, just 3 months after his inauguration, President Jeon made a 2-week visit to the ASEAN countries. This was the most extensive state visit to Southeast Asia by any Korean leaders. This means that Korea recognized the strategic diplomatic role exercised by ASEAN from which Korea could benefit. After that, Korean-Malaysian cooperation was formalized in a number of bilateral agreements. Since 1981, statistical data confirms that there has been a significant growth in economic ties between two countries. By 1990s, Korea had become the 4th largest market for Malaysia's export after Singapore, the United States, and Japan. Bilateral trade also shows a gradual increase in 1980s and 1990s. I'm not going to further details on these sections. Then moving toward new millennium, the two countries as a good partner played important role in building of East Asian regionalism. The 1997 economic crisis was the turning point of a new beginning of regional integration between Southeast Asia and 3 Northeast Asian countries, including Korea, Japan, and China. In the 1997 ASEAN Summit in Kuala Lumpur, held in the middle of regional economic crisis, Mahathir organized the first ever informal APT meetings to discuss measures for encountering economic crisis.
Professor Huang,
yes?
you have 2 minutes left. Is it okay? 2 minutes left, Professor. 2 minutes left. Thank you, Professor.
Okay, during the second, the APT meetings in Hanoi, you know that the Korea initiate the East Asian vision groups, and then this is a development of regional regionalism. Considering China-Japan rivalry, Korea can play a balancing role between them. Malaysia also as a leading figure initiating East Asian regionalism among ASEAN countries also has a regional potential for leading the regional cooperation in East Asia. It means that Korea and Malaysia are regarded as a middle power in Malaysia, and the leaders of the countries greatly contribute to vitalizing the East Asian regionalism through APT architectures. Apart from its political importance, the two countries possesses competitive edges and have a broad margin for further mutually beneficial cooperations in various fields. On the one hand, Korea has been accumulating technical expertise beyond its economic growth. On the other hand, with the abundant natural resources, Malaysia is the most well-to-do nations among ASEAN countries and has much potential for future development. Okay, can skip all this. Okay. Since I don't have enough times, I'm just going to final section of my talks. The year 2012 was the 30th anniversary of the Look-East policies. Then in July 2013, Najib officially launched the launching of the second wave of the Look-East policy. According to Najib, The second wave of the Look East policy would focus on high technology and highly skilled workers. More specifically, he outlined 6 areas of the interesting, ranging from cutting edge technology to bio and environmental technologies. Soon, meetings followed between Korea and Malaysia to revive the Look East policies, with the hope that the new wave would provide a basic frameworks for the bilateral relations for next 30 years. What is more important, also important, is that the Korean government strongly pushed for the new southern policies to dramatically improve cooperative ties with ASEAN. As you all know, the new southern policies is aiming to achieve 3 things: a community for the people that connect people to people and mind to mind, a community for peace that can contribute to peace across Asia, and also a community with a shared prosperity where ASEAN countries strive together with mutual beneficial economic cooperations. And both countries shares the 21st century's predominant values, namely peace, democracy, and the market economies, and international and regional the trend to reinforce ties between Korea and Malaysia. The East Asia becoming the center for global economy and ASEAN's increased role. So Malaysia and Korea have successfully laid a firm foundation for mutually beneficial independent cooperations. It can be defined as a new era of mutually beneficial partnership in the midst of unprecedented international environment. And in conclusion, Malaysia and Korea partnership will grow more comprehensive and cooperative in the near future. This is all my talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Huang. That is a very good historical development between Malaysia and South Korea in the past. And I really like when you coined the idea of the second wave of the Look East policy, and how do we actually match that second wave with Korea's new southern policy. That will be discussed later. Now, next, please allow me to welcome Dr. Lee Jae-hyun to proceed with his presentation.
Thank you so much. This is Jae-hyun from the ASEAN Institute based in Seoul. First of all, I have to say good afternoon for the participants from South Korea, and still good morning for the participants in Malaysia. And I also thank to ISIS Malaysia and MASC and the Korean Embassy in Kuala Lumpur, as well as the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Seoul for having me here today. Many people before me mentioned that we are celebrating the 60th anniversary of Korea-Malaysia relations this year, but unfortunately we have this COVID-19 situation and things are quite difficult. But the bright side of the 60th anniversary is that still we can meet online, because of mask, I would say masks, it's plural. The first, the mask with capital letters, and thanks to the mask with the small letters, we are safe and we can still share our ideas and views on bilateral relations. The Ambassador Lee and Chairman Malaysia ISIS mentioned the various aspects of Korea-Malaysia bilateral relations, as well as Professor Huang mentioned some deeper aspects of Korea-Malaysia bilateral relations. But all these speakers forget one thing. And if I look back, my days, before the elementary school or the primary school kids, when I was a small kid, I still remember that there was a Merdeka football tournament in Malaysia. And I still remember all the days of Malaysia with this Merdeka football tournament. And this morning I had to look at the record of the Merdeka football games, and if I'm not wrong, the Malaysia won 12 championships, and South Korea won 11 championships. And we are the countries with the most number of the Merodeka football tournament championships. Okay, the Professor Huang mentioned the bilateral relations between Korea and Malaysia, but I would like to put this bilateral relations in the regional context, in the context of a multilateral cooperation in East Asia. And the my point is first, looking back, the contributions that Malaysia and South Korea made for the regional cooperation, and I will mention some aspects on the current status of a regional multilateral cooperation in East Asia. And last but not the least, I will suggest some idea of future cooperation between Korea and Malaysia in the context of East Asia regional cooperation. Some bits and pieces of my point were already mentioned by other speakers. Professor Huang actually mentioned some aspects of this. But as you can remember, Malaysia was one of the earliest and the most ardent mover and supporter of regional cooperation in East Asia. And if you look back, early 1990s, it was Dr. Mahathir who first proposed the East Asia economic group, which was, I believe, the first kind of a proposal in the post-Cold War era. At that time, we had this European economic bloc was rising, and in North America, we had NAFTA, and probably Dr. Mahathir wanted to have some kind of equivalent multilateral economic cooperation in East Asia. But the important thing with this East Asia Economic Group was that it set the boundary of East Asia. So Dr. Mahathir's proposal set the boundary of East Asia, and later after the Asian financial crisis in 1998, it was kind of a basis of ASEAN Plus 3, and it first Dr. Mahathir's idea of East Asian countries set the boundary of ASEAN Plus 3 cooperation. It was a not small contribution for Malaysia for the regional cooperation. And now I will move on to the Korean side. We had former President Kim Dae-jung, who was quite proactive in promoting regional multilateral cooperation. Actually, Kim Dae-jung government came into power with the Asian financial crisis. So the number one priority for the Kim Dae-jung administration was how to overcome the economic crisis. And the President Kim Dae-jung had an eye on East Asia regional cooperation, and it was the regional countries who were hit by the economic crisis had to put their hands together to overcome the Asian financial crisis. And it was, as Professor Huang mentioned, South Korea who proposed East Asia Vision Group, East Asia Study Group, and East Asia Forum, and etc. And these institutions were quite instrumental in consolidating the early development of East Asia regional cooperation. But if we look at the current status of regional cooperation in the East, multilateral cooperation in East Asia, the overall the situation is that the multilateral cooperation is weaker than before, and we don't have the regional countries don't have a strong incentive to invest more in multilateral cooperation. That's the current situation. Then why we have this kind of situation? First of all, the regional countries lost the sense of urgency, the memories of economic crisis. All the countries got back to the economic growth again in a couple of years, and they lost the sense of urgency. And second, we don't have this kind of regional leadership like Dr. Mahathir or Kim Dae-jung, most of the regional leaders, the national leaders are mired into their own domestic issues. So we don't have this kind of tall regional leaders anymore. And the third, this is the most important, superpowers. China and the United States, they hijacked regional multilateral cooperation and turned this venue into a venue for their own strategic competition. The question is, do we have the luxury to let just this regional multilateral cooperation go in this strategic situation of superpower competition? Basically, the multilateral cooperation is the weapons of the weak. So the small and medium countries can control the behavior of superpowers. These small and medium countries can put pressure on the superpowers not to destabilize regional situation. And for the regional small and medium countries like Malaysia, Korea, and whole ASEAN, we have our interest in strengthening regional multilateral cooperation. It is the way for the regional small and medium countries to safeguard our own strategic interest. And of course, on top of that, with the multilateral cooperation, we can get really concrete functional, the consequence of functional cooperation. So this is the way for South Korea and Malaysia to deepen their bilateral relations. If we put our hands together to strengthen regional multilateral cooperation, it is the way to deepen our bilateral relations, as well as it is the way for South Korea and Malaysia make more meaningful contribution for the whole region. Okay, to reduce the time pressure on the moderator, I will just stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Lee, for the presentation. I was about to actually ping you stating that 8 minutes have arrived, but you have prompted much earlier. And it's very much interesting that you trace back the memories of the Merdeka football tournament, which I wasn't born yet, but it's good to walk down the memory lane. And particularly Dr. Lee mentions a really good connotations. What if the big superpowers hijack the multilateral cooperation that we have established for so long? What do we do? How do we respond if ASEAN plus 3 or ASEAN and Korea has been hijacked or interjected? What could be the strategy to overcome this? That will be asked later. Now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Lee probably will be called for an urgent meeting later on. We do not know. Yes, Doctor.
Can I just mention, make apology that I'm really sorry, but in my institute, we host Stephen Beagle today for public lecture, and there's a director for external relations. I have to arrange that meeting and lecture, so I probably cannot remain until the end of this session. I'm really sorry for that.
No problem, Doctor. But if there's any imminent question for Dr. Lee, you probably want to share in the chat room. So probably while Dr. Lee is here, probably he can attend to that questions. Right, moving on. Please welcome on the stage or in our virtual stage, Dr. Hu Chiu Ping from the National University of Malaysia. If you may please, Doctor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Zokri. And I want to thank the ISIS Malaysia team and also ROK Embassy in Malaysia for making this happen. So it is very meaningful to commemorate our 60th diplomatic anniversary via this webinar to explore the potentials for 60 years forward. And I really thank Ambassador Lee Chi-bom and also ISIS Malaysia Chair, Mr. Harizal, for giving us a lot of food of thought at the beginning of this webinar. Without further ado, allow me to also provide some of what I'm thinking. So many thanks to Professor Hwang In-won for giving us a very comprehensive historical overview of our bilateral relations, and of course, Dr. Lee Jae-hyun. So both of them are a long-term friend of Malaysia. So I'm very glad to have them on this panel. So I think since I can skip the historical overview of the relations, allow us to look at what we have achieved now and how we can bring this forward. So what we have achieved in this 60 years, the strategic partnership, if we compare to the other ASEAN countries such as Indonesia and Vietnam and even Singapore, there is still a lot to be explored between South Korea and Malaysia. So from this point onward, we need to seriously think about how we can expand our cooperation forward and to some area that we haven't ventured before but have a lot of potentials. So these are some of the core area of cooperation after reviewing the past 6 decades of cooperation and exchanges between Malaysia and South Korea. I think as Dr. Lee Jae-hyun has highlighted during his presentation, there is a very successful joint East Asian regionalism between Kim Dae-jung and also Mahathir Mohamad in the late 90s to early 2000s. And right now we are facing a kind of intensifying geopolitical competition between the superpowers in the world. So our geopolitical and geostrategic space in Northeast Asia and Southeast Asia begin to narrowing down. So there is a need for us to navigate this narrow strategic space together. So, and with that, I would like to highlight some of the niche area for bilateral relations to go forward. So they were divided into the prosperity, peace, and also people pillars. So I will start with the prosperity pillar. So this year, we are not able to conclude our trade negotiation just yet. So I think that is the one area that we can definitely bring forward with the newly announced New Southern Policy Plus and the enduring Look East policy from Malaysia, despite the change of governments. So there is a need to cultivate a working group level, a task force on Korea within Malaysian government to institutionalize our economic cooperation and partnership with South Korea. So this is even more pressing right now because we are facing economic and financial volatility after the COVID-19 pandemic outbreak. So the supply chain has been greatly affected. There is a need to re-establish a kind of a working regional value chain, and what better to work with your nearest neighbor between Northeast and Southeast Asia. So there is a need to further institutionalization in terms of regional mechanism and to offset potential China's economic retaliation in case of economic punishment due to geopolitical tensions. The closer we work with each other, the lesser the economic retaliations effect would be. So in terms of Korea-Malaysia trade and investment, there is a need to, Ambassador Lee Chi-bum has mentioned about the Borneo, and also the video just now has shown the Penang Bridge. So we can actually continue the legacy of Korean's infrastructure diplomacy in Malaysia, and there is a great potential for that coming from Sarawak. So I know that the road condition there is really, really bad even until today. So there is a big promising direction for that to move forward. And of course, we just signed the RCEP, and we very much welcome if South Korea was to be part of the CPTPP. Digitalization, smart cities network, halal industry, future car are some of the industry that is of common interest to the both country as well. And in terms of a peace pillar, I divided into 2 sections. The first section has been articulated very well by Dr. Lee. So I would just very briefly mention that there is a need to jointly looking at the Korean Peninsula issues, South China Sea. So there is a lot of ASEAN member states who kind of feel that the South Korean government doesn't care much about South China Sea. We both understand the concerns about taking in too many problems while taking care of our own problem, but there is a need to foster mutual understanding, hedging between the two powers. So we always said we don't want to choose side, despite the insistence of great power to have us to choose side. So by forging this kind of a middle power cooperation, we can actually navigate together. So to build a regional community that is resilient to face future shock would be the immediate and also to long-term concern. So secondly, we should also look at other areas of cooperation such as maritime, cybersecurity, in terms of maritime confidence building measures. All of those listed here can be realized if we are to, if South Korea target Malaysia as a hub for regional maritime safety capacity building center. So KOICA can set up an office in Sabah. Sabah provide a very good facility and location to accept all of the maritime agencies from Southeast Asia to be concentrated on that point. And South Korea, with their very vibrant shipping industry and also maritime connectivity network, could actually extend and provide this kind of a capacity training and cultivating of expertise in this area. And that will foster better connectivity between Northeast and Southeast Asia maritime route. And at the time of COVID-19 now, maritime route is highly congested, so there is a lot of safety issues. And even under the border lockdown, trafficking and smuggling by sea has increase. So there is a need to pay more attention in this area. Social cultural wise, on the people pillar that Ambassador Lee has also emphasized, the post-COVID-19 pandemic recovery require us to build a resilient medical cooperation and to build a medical health infrastructure for East Asia. So, I would like to highlight the issue that we have just released through ISIS Malaysia. There are many other social cultural components that we can further build upon, such as creative industry, smart cities, and also digital tourism. I really like the series of tourism ad released by South Korea to promote the attractions across the country. And this is something that we can learn from each other and eventually build digital museum and the likes to further promote another type of tourism if border is still under lockdown. So Korea's experience can reaffirm that economic development is the way to further consolidate our partnerships. And we shall invite the counterparts from the three pillars to jointly build workable blueprints to realize the potentials of our Look East Policy 2.0 and the New Southern Policy Plus. So with that, I end my presentation, and also everyone should get a copy of this ISIS Focus Special Edition on the New Southern Policy Plus. Thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hu, for the presentation. What's interesting about Dr. Hu's presentation that she offers us the wake-up call or the diagnosis of the current reality between South Korea and Malaysia. And I think the way that the presentations were held before was really nice in a manner, because the first speaker, Professor Huang, stated on the historical development of these two countries ranging since 1950s and 1960, and Dr. Lee talks about the multilateral setting, and organizations, and then Dr. Hu speaks on the current reality of these two countries and how do we move on from here. So there's a consistency of all these topics that they all have presented. So without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, members of the floor, I open the floor for any questions, any feedback or opinion for us to deliberately discuss. And while Dr. Lee Jae-hyun is still with us, let's try to catch him before he goes off for another important meeting. Yep, yes, any questions, please direct to us, either to Ms. Paulina or myself, and then I'll be sharing the questions to the public. All right. Are we receiving any questions? Or let me just start asking questions just to keep the time running so we are not wasting any time. And while Dr. E is here, again, Doctor, I'm very much intrigued with your explanations on with these two superpowers rivalry, how do we actually should respond to it. And it's also quite a very highlighting moment when you said that the multilateral corporations are for the not so strong powers or for the weak nation states. And again, how do you see the intensity of these interruptions by these great superpowers to the regional multilateral cooperation that we have established since a long time ago? Dr. Lee.
Well, I cannot give you any numbers, of course, to measure the intensity of the superpower competition in this part of the world. But this is my just a personal memory. If I look back, like early mid 2000, when I first got interested in regional cooperation, we all discussed about concrete result of cooperation, what kind of fruits we can get out of this multilateral cooperation, how to overcome the economic crisis. We shared, these were the topics of discussion, and how to build a kind of true regional community out of this 13 countries, ASEAN plus 3, or 16 countries, EAS. But slowly, at the approaching to the end of 2000, we are more talking about China, rising China, Chinese assertiveness, and the U.S. pivot to Asia, and from then on, the South China Sea issues and the U.S.-China competition, all that. And now, if you look at the APEC, ASEAN plus 3, EAS, ARF, all the media coverage is all covered by the Mr. Pompeo said, and what Mr. Wang said, and what Xi Jinping said, and what Trump or Obama said, and what was the kind of a weapon to attack their opponents in South China Sea and militarization in South China Sea. So we're all discussing these kind of strategic issues and the issues of a big power competition. And where's the small and medium countries' interest? Where's the economic cooperation, like the Chiang Mai Initiative, multilateralization, and all that? It's missing. Nobody really cares those kind of things anymore. Maybe at the working level, the guys are still working very hard to further the concrete cooperation between among the regional countries. But at the top, it's all China and US. And which way to go, China or US? What's your decision between China and US? And there's pressure coming from China and US on each individual regional countries. That is the current situation of multilateral cooperation in this part of the world, which is really pity.
Right, thank you, Dr. Lee. Thank you very much. So we have to trace back the narratives of this superpower in order to frame what's the possible reactions from us. Now, I've got a question from Mr. Aaron Dennison. There was a very minimal mention of the Korean wave by the panelists. Is there any reason for this, or is the Korean wave no longer a priority for future relations between Malaysia and Korea? And probably, if I may ask Professor Huang to probably try to address these questions, because Professor Huang looks into the internal politics of Malaysia and internal politics of both countries. Perhaps Professor Huang could say something on this question, sir?
Yes, I think of course, the Korean wave, what we call Hallyu, is one of the most important aspects between the South Korea and Malaysia. You know that in my presentation, I have something, but because of lack of timing, I didn't mention it. But you know, when we mention about bilateral relations, especially Look East policy or Look East policy 2.0, the most of emphasis on economic part. And then but I'm teaching at universities, and then I know what my students have an interest in Southeast Asia, especially in Malaysia. They don't care about economic part. They're most concerned about Malaysia is, the socio-cultural aspect, especially multicultural aspect, multilingual aspect, and then the more important is that English learnings from our side. As you know, that Korean society is rapidly changing to multicultural society as well. We have a lot of immigrant and foreign workers, and then for a long time, we Korea consider as that what we call the one nation, one people dominated. But now it's changing the environment. That we all know that what is important to know about the multicultural aspect from our side, and then from maybe Malaysia side, I think I don't know about Malaysian students why they have interest in Korea, but just guessing that that for them rather than political and economic aspect, their concern, their interest in Korea is more focused on socio-cultural aspect. And then if we compare this, the Look East policy second 2.0 and New Southern policy, in my understanding, Look East policy 2.0 is more focused on economic aspect. But New Southern policy is more focused on people-to-people connections, and that the mind connections, and also the most important is that the shared the interest on peace, and the political aspect. So in that sense, I think the area of that potential between two countries is the socio-cultural aspect, especially Hallyu from Korean side, and then multiculturalism from Malaysia side. We have both, that close interest. So this is a potential the development for the bilateral relations. This is my thoughts.
All right, thank you, Professor. So we just have to jive between the NSP and the Look East policy. We've got a question for Dr. Hu. Dr. Hu, in one of your slides before, you've mentioned that the South Korea and Malaysia relation is a bit slow, and there is a room more that we can achieve. We could have done better. We could have done more in the years to come. Perhaps you want to share with us what could be the stumbling block when you say that it's going rather slow these days or these years, Doctor?
Thank you so much, Dr. Zachary, for that question. And I think that also echo with one of the questions from the audience, from the floor. So has Malaysia taken full advantage of the New Southern policy? So I think this question is a very difficult one, because I think at the track 2, the think tank level, and also from the people-to-people level, we embrace New Southern policy fully. So at the government level, unlike there is a task force on dealing with China, dealing with Belt and Road Initiative, there is no specific task force being formed to really bridge the common interest between New Southern policy from South Korea and also at the Malaysian level. So what we can do, so that I would try to answer the other question raised by Ms. Jenny Goh. So she asked about, is there a one-stop service agency in Korea and maybe in Malaysia for Korean companies and Malaysian companies to to venture into each other's market. So the Presidential Committee on New Southern Policy was supposed to play that role. So under the Presidential Committee on New Southern Policy, Korean companies, relevant Korean ministries with representatives working on the ASEAN counterparts, they would come together and discuss about market entry strategy, and if there is any interest expressed from the Southeast Asian countries, including Malaysia, then they would respond accordingly. But there is no such similar initiative from Malaysia or ASEAN-wide. So there is an ASEAN Korea Center to be established in Singapore. So it is with hope that that would play the role of coordination. So policy coordination is key if we are going to make both the national and also regional outreach successful.
All right, thank you, Doctor. So policy coordination is the key word. Ladies and gentlemen, we've been receiving lots of questions and interest about South Korea and Malaysia relations. And it's a bit of a challenge for me to air these questions out, but let me try by marrying few questions together. There is a question from Ili Abdulrazak and Professor Brian Bridges. As we all know, that policies are initiative of leaders, and leaders come and go. What would be the guarantee that the New Southern policy stays when President Moon Jae-in leaves the office? Or how can we actually guarantee that the Look East policy will still be the drive for the Malaysian government when approaching to South Korea, Japan, as well as China? And particularly, Ili Abdulrazak asked us, how will internal political situation in both Malaysia and South Korea at the moment affect the relationship between both countries? And I think perhaps since it's two questions married together, perhaps two speakers will also have their own views. Let me start with Professor Huang Inwont. What do you think, Professor, on these two questions?
It's very interesting but difficult question to answer. And presentation was quite boring, but the question was very sharp. And you know that I just look at this chatting, you know that, and then I found this question is very interesting. We all mentioned about the key roles of certain leaders, you know that Mahathir and Kim Dae-jung, but these leaders, you know that come and goes. So they're worried about, you know, that what about when new leadership comes, you know, whether, you know, that you have a continuation of these policies or not. You know, this is a dilemma, you know, that as we know, the Mahathir and Kim Dae-jung, the one is still still alive, and then one has passed away. But these two figures actually really play the leading roles in the building of East Asian regionalism. I still remember I was in Malaysia at that time when, you know, that President Kim Dae-jung was in Kuala Lumpur in 1998 when the APT, Mahathir invite the +3 countries leaders, and then it was the first time we have an APT summit. But surprisingly, it was the first time Korea, Japan, China, their leaders meet together. You know, before that, the three countries never met before. The first meeting was held in the Kuala Lumpur in 1998, and then so you know that as a scholar who works on the Southeast Asian politics, you know that we all very you know that touched by this move. But what happened after that, from Kim Dae-jung to Nomuyon, you know that Nomuyon governments, the main foreign policy is that balancing role between among those Northeast Asian countries. So the diplomatic, you know that relation has been narrowed down. So at that time, we have a big quarrels in Korea among scholars. and belongs to who promote East Asian regionalism, especially Southeast Asia plus 3 countries. But the Nomian government, these policymakers, they are more focused on Northeast Asia. But you know that we promote that this is our initiative to lead East Asian regionalism. But after that, we have a new government, Lee Myung-bak and Park Geun-hye. You know that this, of course, Lee Myung-bak, he focused on what we call New Asia. But if this New Asia doesn't mean that that he emphasized on Southeast Asia or East Asia. This is more resource related diplomatic policies. And Park Geun-hye government is more focused on superpowers, traditional superpowers. But luckily, we have a Moon Jae-in government. He promote new southern policies, and then he upgrade the level. What we call the ASEAN status into the 4 major powers status in Korea. So this is the our worry is that the same questions, whether this new southern policy or new southern policy plus will continue after Moon Jae-in government. We don't know. We don't know. But what is more important is that that regardless of these track 1 levels, these track 2 levels and track 3 levels and civil society levels, we all know the importance of Southeast Asia and that these East Asian regions. So I think this kind of the ground feeling is going to push forward track 1 to continue the similar policies, or that more specific that diplomatic strategies between these two countries and also these 2 regions. So I totally agree. These questions, that this is our weak point, that in terms of the continuation of our policies.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Hu, very quick on this, please.
So as Professor Huang has mentioned, domestic politics is definitely one of the greatest obstacles to ensure continuity. However, with the substantive and further institutionalized cooperation, such as this one that we are having right now between ISIS Malaysia and also with ROK Embassy and also MOFA of Republic of Korea. With that, we will ensure the continuity of our collaboration without being hijacked by the change of the government. The same can be said about on the Malaysian part. We are now in a very volatile situation where the government can be changed anytime. So as long as the working level group officials maintain these ties, then there will be no problem.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. Now, we have seen Dr. Stephen Leong raise his hand in this virtual room. Perhaps Dr. Leong would like to ask questions. If you may want to unmute your microphone and show the video first, that would be lovely. Please, Dr. Stephen Leong, if you can hear me.
Yes. Thank you very much for the opportunity. May I make an observation? I won't ask a question, but I feel it's very relevant.
So if you may please show the camera, Doctor, if you don't mind.
Show the camera, let's see.
No. Attendees do not have video.
Oh, okay. Oh. Sorry for that. All right, so, Doctor, go ahead.
Just audio, yeah? Okay. I would like to make a relevant observation in our bilateral relationship, especially on the issue of governance. We need to learn from one another so that we can come closer and also to be a positive influence to other countries. I can't help but feel that in the case of ROK, Malaysia can learn on governance from Seoul. Because when we look back, the achievements of Korea, industrially, everything else, when it comes to governance, we have seen examples, interestingly, of former presidents being prosecuted and sentenced to jail, being in a way in public view, wearing prisoner locked up outfit and so on. For Malaysia, we can learn from them in Korea because it sets the example of, despite all the achievements, governance accountability of leaders is very critical. For the first time in Malaysia, we have this case of a prime minister being indicted for huge corruption, huge kleptocracy case that the DOJ in America has described as the biggest kleptocracy case in the world. And in the case of Korea, we learned that those presidents, for example, Chun Doo-hwan, No Tae-woo, Kim Yong-sam, and Lee Boon-hyuk, and Park Geun-hye, have all been held accountable. In the case of Malaysia, if I may speak frankly, I think we need to bear in mind and pay attention to this issue, that constantly there must be accountability. 60 years from now, up to 20 to 80, we need to bear this in mind so that we can move forward. Thank you for the opportunity to view this.
Thank you, Dr. Leong, for your observations. Yes, indeed, the learning experience should be transparent and we should be more open in learning from each other. Having said that, on behalf of ISIS, as well as the Embassy of Korea, we will also want to hear from all of our audience any aspirations that you have regarding on the South Korea and Malaysia relations. Like, what are the things possibly that you think that we could venture into in the future that makes this bilateral relations prosper and much better in the future? Yeah, so if you do have any aspirations, it's either that you just chat with us and we'll definitely pass the message on. If you wish to speak to us in this virtual room, that's also fine. Now let's go to the second of the next questions, right? Okay, I have a question for Dr. Hu. Someone asked in the panel room, what are the panel views on the Malaysia approach? Has Malaysia taken a full advantage of NSP as compared to other ASEAN nations? I think probably we want to do a benchmarking on how do actually Malaysia respond to the NSP in regards to other ASEAN countries. Perhaps Dr. Hu would like to answer this question?
Oh yes, thank you, Dr. Zokri. I think there is a need for the Presidential Committee on New Southern Policy to promote what is their policy mechanism so that the Malaysian counterpart, especially at the government level, could understand how this works. So for example, how do we penetrate each other's market? How can we further advance our economic interests? How to conduct our social cultural exchanges, medical health exchanges? So far, all of this have been very well done by other countries such as Indonesia, Malaysia that has a coordinating ministry, and Singapore act as the coordinator between ASEAN and ROK on standardization, on science and technology, on medical science cooperation. So there is a niche to be further explored, and as I presented in my presentation just now, so there is other niche that we can further explore, such as maritime safety cooperation, cybersecurity, so other things that Malaysia is able to take up and not yet being dominated by other ASEAN countries.
Thank you, Dr. Hu. I've been also, Professor, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just should, thanks for Dr. Stefan Leung's comments. It's quite a long time to see Dr. Stefan Leung. And then thanks, that maybe Korea can be recorded as a, world record in terms of putting our former president in jails, and then as a specialist on Malaysian domestic politics, that I always, what is the weakest point of Malaysian politics is closely related to what Stefan Leung said. But that doesn't mean that, that you need to put your former prime minister in jail. But, that I have something in my mind. But what I'm going to tell us about is that one other aspect that we can share is that the experience of democratization in both countries. When I started my studies on Malaysian politics was quite boring. It's always it's stable, always stable. But the stable doesn't mean that that there's a political development, democratization. But as you all know, it suddenly happens. Suddenly happens a few years ago, and then my last visit to Malaysia was January this year. But after coming back from Malaysia, what happened in February? And then, so I'm not saying that Malaysia can learn from Koreans the democratization process. We need to both learn. I think this is a long process, democratization, but I understand what happened in Malaysia. Because when he talks about democratization, there's a period of U-turns. But maybe I think Malaysia is experiencing this U-turn period. Korea also had experience of this U-turn period. But that doesn't mean that Korea is achieving the democracy in full. So, since the Stefan Leung mentioned about this, that the governance of accountability of leaders, I think this is another area we can learn, or we can compare both countries in terms of the shared experience of democratizations. This is my comment.
Yes, on that note, Professor, I think if you come to Malaysia starting next month, it will become more interesting, as at the moment, the national budget is under scrutiny. Anything could happen from this national budget. So I think you should try to book your plane tickets here in January and onwards. Thank you, Professor. I have the questions from Ken Long Mok. I think the questions is also been asked to any of the MAS members. Yeah, if any one of you, or perhaps Datuk Steve would also like to put his thought on this. Now, are there any efforts done or future planning to settle both countries' currency exchange directly without involving the US dollars after 60 years? Wow, that's a really very good, intriguing questions, yeah? So is it possible for us to have a bilateral currency exchange without referring to the US dollars? And I will also open this question to any of the MAS members to see the possibility of this.
So I would like to personally hear from Dato' Stephen's view about this as well. So, but I think first we need to have our bilateral trade agreement settled first before we can talk about the currency. But at the moment, we do have a post-Asian financial crisis mechanism, which is known as Chiang Mai Initiative Multilateralization, CMIM. So that is a currency swap arrangement since the Asia financial crisis in late 90s. So I think that is like a multilateral currency swap agreement. So bilaterally, that would require a very strong commitment from both countries. So I think that would be a long way to go.
Yeah, sorry, go on, Dato'.
Yeah, if I can say something, I think it's something that not only concerns Malaysia, I think it's also an issue that concerns South Korea. Whenever we become, it is the nature of the global reserve currencies and how they are being managed. I think it's one that concerns the whole of East Asia, actually. But I think probably South Korea more, since a lot more of their trade is directed towards the United States. As we know, a very great proportion of the global reserve currencies, the denomination of everything from commodities to to industrial goods, etc., are not done in our domestic currencies. And in fact, if we were to denominate, for example, our trade in Korean won, or vice versa, we would find ourselves, our exporters would actually find themselves in problems because getting access to this pool, the pool is quite restricted. So we still have to go through the, through the US dollar as an intermediary. When a global crisis hits, generally what happens in terms of the East Asia region is that we all have scarcity of US dollars, okay? Now, in the past, what has happened is that the US Fed has made special lines of dollars available to Korea, okay? The same has not happened for Malaysia. So, they don't have special lines. Japan has a special line, etc. And this is in order to facilitate. So while it is a good idea to start thinking in terms of, like Chiang Mai Initiative, where we can borrow. This is presuming, of course, that the one country is better off, is in more of a liquid situation where where they can lend. The issue of denomination of trade is not that simple. We need access to the pools. Malaysia has got a limited amount of trade with China that is denominated in renminbi. But certainly because the renminbi itself is not internationalized and there isn't enough issuance anyway, so that always has to sort of remain sort of contained. So I think this is something that we ought to move towards. There have been efforts in the past to talk about an Asian currency unit, etc. These things are still very much in an incipient stage. And when they happen, I think the won and the ringgit and maybe other sort of currencies will have to be pulled into a regional basket rather than having sort of individual, currency denominations in specific currencies. Thank you.
Thank you, Dato'. Any other comments or observations from the rest regarding the question? All right, with that, I think we are coming to an end of the agenda. My clock shows that it's 12 noon, and I think I've had all questions so far, and all questions have been answered academically and frankly by all panelists. Unfortunate enough, Dr. E has to excuse himself much earlier, which is fine, but Dr. Lee will come again at the afternoon forum. So once again, on behalf of ISIS and Republic of Korea, we thank all panelists for being with us today, and then to all of the viewers and our guests who also joined the session. We thank you for the questions and for your time. 지금까지 여러분 같이 있으면 너무 감사드리고요. 앞으로에도 두 번째 포럼 있을 건데 kena tu manapshida. Let's meet at the second forum. And I think on behalf of ISIS and the Republic of Korea, thank you for everything. And I would like to apologize if there's any wrongdoing or if there's any shortcomings while I'm moderating the forum. This is my first time. I'm very nervous, but I hope that we all have learned a lot from each other. And it is our aspiration actually that we learn from each other in line with the New Southern policy where people-to-people interaction is important. This is an avenue for us to observe and to learn from one another. On a personal note, I wish South Korea and Malaysia a very best of luck in cooperating and collaborating together. And it is my personal aspiration to see that the New Southern policy becomes a success for Korea, as well as the Look East policy become a success for Malaysia for a greater harmonious interaction between two countries. On that note also, ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any personal aspirations for both South Korea and Malaysia, how do we actually foster greater relationship? Please air your aspiration to us. We will definitely share your aspirations with the embassy as well with ISIS for more discussions. With that, ladies and gentlemen, do not forget there will be a second session which is going to start at 1:30 at 1:30, which entitled Crafting Pragmatic Ways Forward. Yeah, so they'll also have a great panels on the forum, so please do not miss that. Until then, I wish you have a pleasant day ahead, have a great lunch, bon appetit, and I'll see you next. Thank you. Back to the co-moderator, Ms. Fraulina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zulkifli. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes the first half of today's proceedings. The session will be taking a short break. The next session will begin at 1:30 Malaysia time and 2:30 p.m. Korea Standard Time. Thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to continuing discussions then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Baru 20 tahun. Ya, makanan kegemaran saya banyak, tapi paling sukanya kepala ikan gulai lemak cili api dan daging salai dari negeri Sembilan.
Makanan kegemaran saya adalah nasi ayam yang dijual di gerai mamak. Nasi tersebut terdapat ayam goreng, timun, kacang, ikan bilis dan juga sambal yang madu. Wih, sedap gila.
KL, Tioman, Ipoh, Cameron Island, dan Sabah, Sarawak, semua saya suka.
Saya suka Datuk Seri Nurhaliza kerana saya membesar di Malaysia dengan lagu-lagu
여기는 인기가 많은 덕수동입니다. 여기서 한눈에 들어오는 역사와 문화의 한 장의 한두 급.
우선 한국의 좋은 점은 한국 사람들이 친절하다는 점과 교통이 잘 되어 있어 이것저것 여행하기 편리하다는 점입니다.
지금까지는 저는 쭈꾸미 볶음을 좋아해요. 왜냐면 아주 맵고 그리고 쫄깃쫄깃해서 너무 좋아요. 제가 좋아하는 그룹은 트와이스입니다. 왜냐하면 트와이스 노래를 들을 때마다 기분이 좋아지고 그리고
Ya, selamat menyambut ulang tahun hubungan diplomat Korea dan Malaysia yang ke-60 tahun.
말레이시아와 대한민국의 60주년을 정말 축하드립니다. 감사합니다.
말레이시아와 한국 수교 60주년을 축하드립니다. 감사합니다.
Selamat ulang tahun ke-60 hubungan diplomatik antara Korea dan Malaysia. 한국 말레이시아 수교 60주년 축하합니다. Yeah!
Okay. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the 4th Malaysia Scholars on Korea event titled 60 Years and Beyond, Preparing Malaysia-Republic of Korea Relations for a New Era. A reminder to those on the Zoom platform, please turn off your camera and audio during the sessions to ensure clarity of bandwidth for our online presenters. For those who wish to pose questions to panelists, you may place your questions in the chat box or via the Q&A function. Moving along with today's proceedings, we will now have the panel discuss on crafting pragmatic ways forward. And I wish to invite Professor Hong to moderate the session. Professor Hong, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Selamat datang. Selamat datang. Selamat datang. Good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. Let me introduce myself to you. My name is Hong Seok-jun from Mokpo National University, Republic of Korea. I'm an anthropologist and I'm one of the Southeast Asian area specialists focused on the Malaysian society and culture. I have interested in the society and culture of Southeast Asia, especially focused on Malaysian society and culture. First of all, I'd like to express the deepest gratitude to take part in this wonderful webinar organized by the Malaysian Scholars in Korea, MASK, and ISIS Malaysia. It's my great honor to moderate this session 2 on crafting pragmatic ways of forward. This session's topic is about crafting pragmatic ways forward. In the midst of competing regional policies, such as Chinese Belt and Road Initiative, 일대일로 in Korean, as well as Japan's partnership for quality infrastructure. South Korea's new Southern Policy and New Southern Policy Plus have to seek niche areas of collaboration which could grow relations between Malaysia and South Korea. This session aims to deepen discussions in 3 areas. The first is learning from South Korea's experience to develop Malaysia as a contributor to international aid and development, including ICT, green energy, Korea smart city policy, future technologies, ODA and culture ODA, etc. The second is the promotion of Malaysia-Korea exchange and cooperation in the maritime sector, including marine science, technology, and the infrastructure, with a special reference to topics on highlights of ASEAN-Malaysia cooperation on maritime and pragmatic ways for maritime cooperation. And the third is to identify specific areas for future technologies, collaboration between Malaysia and Korea. Key takeaway could highlights underutilized or niche areas that could be explored, challenges when it comes to mechanism of implementation, and build a pragmatic way forward to implement the new Southern Policy and the new Southern Policy Plus. I'd like to cordially invite one co-moderator and 4 speakers in this session. The co-moderator is Mr. Harris Jainul. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you, Professor Huang. My name is Harris Zainal. I'm an analyst at ISIS Malaysia. I've been involved in Malaysia-Korea relations for the past 3-4 years, and I'm also a member of the MASK network. It's a pleasure to be co-moderating this session. Thank you.
Thank you. First speaker is Ms. Sumati Permal. She is fellow and head Center for Straits of Malacca. Second speaker is Dr. Ho Young-kyung. She is a senior research fellow, Department of Accounting, Sunway University. Third speaker is Dr. Lee Jae-yong. He is director of Smart City Research Center, Korea Research Institute for Human Settlement, Republic of Korea. Fourth speaker is Dr. Fahmi Eng. He is a managing director of Smart Selangor Delivery Unit. Please welcome everyone. I'd like to give a presentation time to you, 10 minutes, within 10 minutes. Please. I hope this session will be productive and meaningful outcomes through excellent presentation and discussions. Thank you for your attention and cooperation. Thank you. Please, first speaker.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Hong, for the introduction. Let me begin by thanking ISIS and Republic of Korea for having me here at this MASK forum. And I would like also to take this opportunity to congratulate Republic of Korea and Malaysia for their 6-year successful bilateral relation. So I am tasked to talk about the possibilities of particular ways, pragmatic ways on maritime cooperation. So in doing so, I will first talk about how Malaysia have been participating actively in many other cooperation, in particular maritime cooperation, including China's Belt and Road Initiative, as well as Japanese Free and Open Indo-Pacific, which includes for quality infrastructure, soft connectivity, as well as strategic maritime dialogue across broad range of international affairs, including the South China Sea, rule-based order, and recently on maritime connectivity. In this regard, Malaysia as a pragmatic actor in global cooperation, I think I'm quite optimistic for more cooperation within the South Korean New Southern Policy. So under the New Southern Policy, Republic of Korea stated its desire to jointly respond to issues like terrorism as well as cyber and maritime threats in the region. Since then, there have been some practical cooperation, including the Korean ASEAN Center for Transnational Crime Investigation and capacity building on marine litter monitoring and collection projects. I think these two are very important initiatives. In this regard, I would also like to highlight other pragmatic maritime cooperation that have been undertaken by the Republic of Korea with Southeast Asian member countries. Actually, I have provided about 6 or 7 practical activities that have been undertaken between Korea and member states, but the highlights will be the ASEAN ROK cooperation in on maritime connectivity that runs parallel to the deepening of Korea-Mekong cooperation. So generally, ASEAN welcomes greater Korean engagement to balance against uncertainties from emerging US-China strategic competition. This is because I think Republic of Korea is considered a middle power, and countries in Southeast Asia can work closely with South Korea and other middle powers like Australia, Japan, and so on. So one important area for cooperation is on regional maritime security. Is certainly on securing energy supplies is important for Korea for its goods that mainly passes the Straits of Malacca and the South China Sea. So focusing on the Straits of Malacca, which has been a very positive cooperation, the project coordination committee is the body that implements various projects under the cooperative mechanism to promote safety of navigation and various environmental protection. It is a concrete demonstration of cooperation and burden sharing between the littoral states and the user states. South Korea have, as a user state, have been cooperating with Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia on the Straits of Malacca by sharing their expertise and stated its pledged is contribute to Aids of Navigation Fund. One key project that saw participation of the South Korea under the PCC is the demonstration of automatic identification system, Class B transponder, to support and enhance navigational safety, and this project was successfully completed. Another is the Marine Lateralling Highway demonstration project in the Straits of Malacca. To narrow down more specific cooperation between Korea and think tank like MIMA, KMI and MIMA have exchanged scholars for research, and the delegation from KMI was on annual basis to MIMA, and there has been regular engagement across maritime issues, including environment, economy, and legal related issues. And instead, in September 2017, KMI, MIMA, and the EAIR, the East Asian International Relations Caucus, co-organized a workshop on maritime and territory in the Asia-Pacific region. Besides, the Yosu Academy of the Law of the Sea has been funding researchers, government staffs, to participate and learn about the United Nations UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea and Ocean Management. And NEMA is proud to say that NEMA have been sending researchers, a small group of people who have benefited from the program and received diploma in Law of the Sea. So what I would like to point out is, I think there have been many activities or practical cooperation that Korea and Malaysia and Korea and ASEAN have undertaken. And to this, I would like to conclude my presentation by proposing three pragmatic way forward for maritime cooperation. First is on maritime risk assessment, which is, I think it's a very niche area that requires in-depth research. Thus far, not many Southeast Asian countries has not given detailed assessment on maritime risk assessment on port facilities. We learned through a recent exchange on a webinar on ports organized by NEMA and major ports along the Straits of Malacca and also in the South China Sea, that threats related, cyber threats and maritime risk assessment are important elements to be researched or to be studied. The second area is, I think that there are new opportunities or new area for research in the wake, in relation to the wake of pandemic, the COVID-19. If you look at the positive development is for the shipping and ports, which are now investing on digitalization. So ports around the world are increasingly investing on digitalization and automation, which may also require to enhance safety and security and to improve environmental performance. I think this is something that Korea may want to engage Malaysia on addressing security development for shipping and ports in the age of digitalization. I'm sure that Korea can assist bridging the gap between well-developed modern ports such as in ports of Busan or Incheon with the ports in Malaysia that are struggling with digitalization. And the third or final proposal that I have is also that in the past, Korea have indicated possible cooperation on real-time data and environmental protection as one of the area. However, there hasn't been much discussion since then. Perhaps this is one pragmatic cooperation. Real-time data on environment or big data in the Straits of Malacca is lacking. So this is since the information or that data or either is too large or created too quickly in real time, it's difficult to analyze. So nevertheless, it is useful for countries like Malaysia and other littoral states in the Straits of Malacca. So in this regard, it will be highly useful for user states as well as government agencies, non-governmental organizations and private firms, in particular on environmental protection. So this real-time data is highly sought for in improving areas like energy efficiency, promoting environmental protection, tracking climate change, and also monitor illegal fishing. So with that, I will stop here and I look forward for the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So this presentation, the overviews and examine Malaysia-Korea maritime cooperation, 60 years and beyond, preparing Malaysia and the Republic of Korea. Thank you so much. The second presenters is Dr. Ko Young-young, please.
Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Ko Young-young. I'm a senior research fellow from the Songhay University in Malaysia. Can you hear me? And can you see this my slide on your screen?
Yep. Yes.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk about the kind of a strategic approach for sustainable development between Korea and Malaysia economic relations. All right. I have only 10 minutes, so I would not like to talk about all the overview of historical economic relations between two countries. But actually, Korea is a very significant trade partner, and then 12th ranked contributor of foreign direct investment into Malaysia. But nowadays, we can see the FDI trend into Malaysia is a little bit declining. And then from the perspective from the Korean investment, okay, look at, you can see the right side is like, sorry, I didn't change the name of a country. So yellow color is Vietnam. So the right hand side, the graphic indicates the Korean investment in ASEAN 4 is concentrated on Vietnam. So in the other side, the investment into Malaysia is a red color. It's a little bit up and down, but much lower than Vietnam or Indonesia. So that's why our relationship between Korea and Malaysia is getting weaker and weaker in terms of foreign direct investment. So in the other side, Malaysia nowadays is very interested in attracting foreign direct investment for the economic growth and development. So what's the key driver for next era? So nowadays, you can see in the graph, the stock index. So there's a declining and during the pandemic and then upward. So we say it is a K-shaped recovery during and the post-COVID-19. But there are two key main sectors to driving the economic recovery for Malaysia and other countries, technology and healthcare. So there is two key sectors for the Malaysia. But let's look at the shared prosperity vision 2030 and the new southern policy from Korea and from Malaysia and Korea. So those two countries already share the values of people, community, and sustainable development. And then one of the key drivers for those two policies is technology for great and good virtue. Okay, So already Korea has a Green New Deal and Digital New Deal and Asia financial hub policy, but also Malaysia has those kind of same identity of policies include under the shared prosperity vision. But how we can start and what is the appropriate strategic approach for the partnership beyond the 60 years of economic relations. But there are many different types of sectors and industries. So for the future is Industry 4.0 and big data or smart farming or ASEAN hub or Islamic finance and renewable energies. There are so many different types of industry and sectors we are interested in for development. But we cannot cover up all those things for those two countries' relations. And then there is no clear boundaries among industries recently. It's all hyper-connected. But anyway, every industry, the key driver is technology or ICT-based. Okay, and then another key word for the economic growth is sustainability. So I think we have to consider feasibility, effectiveness, and efficiency. So we have to choose or select what few industry or sectors and projects we need to focus on. Then we can develop and the big picture and roadmaps for the next 10 years or 20 years. Because there are so many projects and they're talking about and discussion between two countries, but never continue for the real practical development. That's why I think about we need to focus on just a few sectors and then we can build up for the next era. And then what is the role of the two governments? Is it digital free trade zone or fast track or FTA or SEPA or investment incentives? With those two countries' government needed to support the private sectors, not government-driven policy. So how to support those real private sectors industry get into Malaysia or get into Korea for the further partnership and cooperation. So what sector in tech? Because the tech industry is too broad. So now I think about which sector in tech fit for the first step for partnership beyond the 60 years, the economic relationship. So there is a 7 strategic thrust under the Shared Prosperity 2030. Okay, and then there is proposed 15 key economic growth activities. Yeah, these are 8 enablers. It's all from the Malaysia policy. So I think about which is a common and then really easy to get restart. So I pick up some and then I also consider Malaysia Budget 2021. So I considered those policy and then Budget 2021. I pick up the 2 areas. One is the small, medium-sized enterprise, the digital transformation. And then the other word is infrastructure development. But already in Malaysia, there are very established infrastructure development. But nowadays, we need to combine ICT technology together. So I give you some example. Is SME digital transformation is one of the very key terms for the Korean economic policy, because SMEs is a key player for Malaysian economy and also Korean economy too. And how to enhance their capacity and competence, we needed to provide some grants and support and education for their digitalization. That's the key, the same objective of Korean government policy too. So we can cooperate those kind of program for those 2 countries. There is one case where SMEs digitalization is the company is a Swingby, is a startup, but actually Malaysian Korea startup. They are doing business in Malaysia and in other countries too, but they are really support the SMEs digitalization. So is very unique software as a SaaS company, SaaS startup. And then another example is beyond infra. I already talked about those kind of infrastructure needed to be combined with ICT. So I give an example, the K Smart Water. K Water is a government-owned company in Korea, so managing all the supply of the water and the management of water supplier. So K-Water is only one company experience integrated water management system in the world. Not only one, but they have enough the experience. So they are using all different types of ICT technology and then to provide and managing all the water supply and the water system too. So this is the very new technology for water supply system. But actually, is nowadays Malaysia also has some kind of a water crisis in Selangor and KL. So the Malaysia government also allocated a lot of budget on the water supply, improve the water supply system. So there is one corporation cases, WePlat. WePlat is a startup under the K-Water. So they already have some co-working project with Syarikat Air Terengganu is a Satu Terengganu. Okay, so they already started some project to apply the intelligent water leakage management platform. Is a cloud-based total leakage management software, and then which can detect water leak location service with AI technology. So this is one of the good example for those two countries, the companies co-work and the collaboration project, and then how to apply the ICT technology. So for the next era, we needed to we needed to focus on just a few projects, including the technology itself, technology and policy together. So those two cases, they show what's the best strategy fit for the first step forward, the next, the economic relationship, or economic partnership, the beyond the 60 years. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you for listening. Do you have any question?
Thank you for your nice presentation. Next turn is
because I realize that there is some time limit, so I spoke it very fastly. Yeah.
Thank you. Turn is next speaker is Dr. Lee Jae-yong. Please.
Can you see my presentation file? Okay, thank you. And my name is Jae-yong Lee, and I'm working for the Korean Research Institute for Human Settlements. That's actually the government, the research institute. So my role is usually to support the government policy. And I am the director of a Smart City Research Institute. Therefore, my role is to support the Korean Smart City National Plan or Korean Smart City legal system or something like that. Therefore, today I want to present about the smart city policy in Korea. And actually, we have very long experience about the smart city construction. We've started the smart city construction since 2003, and that's relatively longer than any other country in the world, I think. So therefore, you can get you can learn from the Korean smart city policy experience. And we have 3 different phases when we constructed the smart city. And as I said before, we started the smart city construction from the 2003. And at this phase, we are only focused on the infrastructure first. And as we already know that smart city needs some kind of ICT infrastructure with urban infrastructure. That's a kind of combination, the urban infrastructure with the ICT. And the first phase, we constructed some kind of new urban facility. That's what we call the intelligent facility. Intelligent facility means some urban infrastructure with some IoT or CCTV or sensor or something like that. And the other important urban infrastructure was the operation center. Because if we have the operation center, we can connect many different or various services together in one infrastructure, one center, in one center. And the network is also important. Therefore, under the Korean smart city legal system, intelligent facility, operation center, and the internet network are the main infrastructure of a smart city. And when we started the smart city project, we have a lot of empty places to construct some kind of new town. That's more than, I think, 20 sites of a new town. Therefore, we use this kind of the new town site to construct a new smart city infrastructure. And the important thing was the fund. How can we get the enough fund to construct some kind of new smart city infrastructure? But we have a lot of new town site, and in the case of new town site, it is easy to get the fund from the development profit. As we already know that when you construct some kind of new town in the empty place, you can get a lot of development profit. So the government used this development profit to construct the smart city infrastructure. That was the first phase of Korean smart city. Therefore, we using the development profit to construct internet network, intelligent facility, and many operation centers. And we have enough the smart city infrastructure, some kind of new infrastructure. And the average cost of the smart city infrastructure construction was around $30 million. And this money, all of this money comes from the development profit in the new town site. And after we get the enough infrastructure, we consider about the data or platform or some kind of functional integration. We already, nowadays, most of the cities in Korea has their own operation center nowadays. And now Korean government also support the money to get their own smart city platform in the operation center. That's current one of the national smart city project. Anyway, at this time we have some kind of a new digital infrastructure. Therefore, we consider the platform to connect many different services together in one center. But when we tried this kind of project, it is anyway, it's go well when we construct this kind of a center or platform. The problem was the management and the operation. So when we operate this kind of the convergent service or connected services in one center, the problem was who will operate or who will manage it or this one. Therefore, the many different related organizations need to cooperate together because in the operation center, we need to monitor some kind of a crime scene, or sometimes we need to monitor the firing scene or something like that. Therefore, we need to cooperate with the police station or fire station or something like that. So we finally realized that when we operate this kind of smart city services, the governance is very important. So therefore, after this phase, the Korean governments do not only focus on the infrastructure or technology, we also focus on the governance part also. So that was the one important point to know. And this one is one example of the Korean Smart City Operation Center. In the case of Operation Center, local governments operate the center. However, when you provide some kind of services, you need to cooperate with many different organizations, including the rail or the police station or blah blah, something. That's a lot of different organizations cooperate with the Smart City Operation Center. Therefore, not only system integration, but also organization cooperation is important at that time. And now it's a current phase of smart city. Now we have some nice smart city infrastructure, and also we have some basement about the connecting service or connecting many different data with many different organizations. And therefore, we consider about to test the many different the services in the real urban area. Anyway, we already know that there are a lot of there is world city population will go to the 9 billion in 2050, and we cannot cover the urban problems because urban population grows too fast to cover all this kind of the urban problems. So when previous the urban model was to construct more physical infrastructure, but this one cannot be the solution because each governments do not have enough budget to construct many physical infrastructure to cover the urban problems. Therefore, we need to some new type of urban model. That's a smart city, and the smart city is anyway the solution to solve the urban problem. And this one uses some kind of the information technology to make a city more efficient. So instead of the construction more highway or more roads, we use data and the navigation services. Navigation services nowadays know that the previous the traffic congestion or some kind of traffic situation, and the navigation notice drivers to use some other roads. Therefore, even we do not have enough roads, the car was distributed properly and very efficiently. So the traffic problem was solved to using the ICT technology, something like that. And as I said before, in the phase of construction, we construct a lot of different the smart city the infrastructure, and in the phase of management, we are focusing on the functional or the integration. So we use some kind of platform, and not only the technology part, we also consider about the organization part. So we consider about the governance part also. Nowadays, we are more focused on the how to bring the innovation in the city. That was the current task of Korean smart city. This one is the current Korean smart city policy in Korea. We are focusing on the new town project. This one is a national pilot project, and we are focusing on some kind of very comprehensive smart city model in empty place in the new town. And in this case, we also consider not only the infrastructure, we also consider about urban planning itself. We changed the urban plan. For example, in the case of Sejong, we consider about some kind of sharing car, autonomous shuttle in urban design of phase. Therefore, probably we will construct some kind of new concept of infrastructure in the city, because it is possible, because it is a new town and the empty place. And Busan is another national pilot project. And we also consider about the existing city also. So in the case of existing city, we use some kind of competition or type or supporting, and we also consider about the bottom-up part. And many different local governments suggest their solution with private companies, and the national government select some best cases and the supporting money. That's kind of the existing cities approach. And the platform is also important. And nowadays, more than 100 cities already have their own platform in their center. And by 2023, the 229 cities will have their own platform. And we also consider about the human resource and the central government support master and doctorate degree students about the smart city. And the regulation is governance, and the regulation is also important. So we have that kind of regulation-free sandbox program. Therefore, you can many companies can test their solution without considering some kind of the regulation. And so the Korean government did some kind of step-by-step approach. The first part, they constructed some kind of ICT infrastructure first. And after that, we consider about the urban platform, and we consider about the functional integration and some kind of organization or integration. And nowadays we are testing some innovation in the real city. So the central government provide many different programs to support the innovation in the city. That's the current approach of smart city in Korea. And with the Malaysia, we can consider the many different cooperation, because nowadays Malaysia considers smart city can be one of the important industry, and Korea also. And Korea already constructed or applied the smart city concept in the new town and the existing city also. And I know that Malaysia also have two types of the city construction. So we can cooperate about the infrastructure and the technology. And we also consider about the platform part, some kind of software part. And one of very important thing is not only the technology, you also consider about the policy or legal system or some kind of programs. In that case, we have a long experience about that, so we can cooperate together about the smart city part. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your nice presentation. Dr. Lee introduced the history of Korean smart city policy, and it examines the characteristics and the meanings of Korean smart city policy. Thank you so much. Next speaker is Fami Enga. Please welcome.
Yeah. Hello, Professor. Hi. Can you see me and hear me clearly, Professor?
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Can I just share a presentation quickly as well, I presume? Let me just share my screen quickly. Okay, can you guys see this?
Yep.
Hello? Yeah, okay,
Yep.
great. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, let me just quickly do my 10 minutes. So basically, hi, my name is Fahmi. I'm the managing director of a Smart Selangor Delivery Unit. That is the unit completely owned by the Selangor state government with the mandate to deliver Smart Selangor, which is a program to make Selangor as a smart state in ASEAN by the year 2025. Basically, we're completely state-owned, and our role in all this is to design and integrate smart state solutions. Dr. Lee spoke a lot about the need to integrate systems, the need to integrate regulations, collaborate. I mean, that's the whole gist of the how you build a smart city, and we are in the 4th year of this program. We started back in 2016. And I think for the remaining 5 years, there's been a lot more focus and impetus given by the state government for us to do this on a grander scale. The reason why we are doing it, I think the same everywhere in every other smart city, Korea, you know, if you take even Singapore, or even the cities in Malaysia, is to look at the next growth curve. And we sincerely believe that this is the next growth curve for Selangor as the economic powerhouse of Malaysia. If they can't show us the way, we still have to show them a certain way on how you can build a better or newer economy in the future. Competition is the other reason why we are embarking on this project. You look even in Malaysia, there are 4 or 5 smart cities. We are going to be one of them. So in Selangor, the reason why we call it the Smart State Program, because in Selangor itself at the moment, there are already 2 major smart city programs. One, you can look at Cyberjaya, everybody knows that in Malaysia. And I think Petaling Jaya and also Subang Jaya are also aspiring to become smart cities. Now, what we do at the smart state level is to look at that integration, that effective integration of these cities to have a better state management. And we believe that this is the right way forward to kind of build it and approach this problem from a state perspective rather than from the city perspective. Because from our experiences in Malaysia, what we are seeing is if smart cities are being built, and they are being built by developers, so it will be more built from the perspective of the developer rather than the city manager themselves. So I think it has to be looked at from a completely different perspective. So we are approaching it from the smart state perspective rather than the city perspective. And I think when we talk about integration, I think Dr. Lee talks about integrating multi-systems, multi-agencies. Technology specifications become very challenging because if you leave it down to the cities to explore and use different kinds of systems, I can guarantee you when it comes to data integration, system integration, it will be a big nightmare. So I think there's going to be an issue there. Our program has been given this refresh look. So recently in August, the state had allowed us to come up with a more focused, more targeted plan, a blueprint for this program. It's on our website, www.smartselangor.com.my/publications. You're welcome to take a look at it. There are a lot of opportunities in there for local and foreign private companies in terms of technology, in terms of solutions, even in terms of programs to ensure better adoption of the technological solutions that we produce here. In summary, this is what it is. So we've spoken about the livable smart state in ASEAN vision. We've spoken about the objectives is to create communities that are livable, economically more productive and more environmentally conscious by using digital technologies. There's a lot of digital technology opportunities here to be developed by private sectors. And essentially, we've realigned the program. Before we had 12 domains. Now there's only 4 where smart digital infrastructure kind of like cuts across the smart government, economy, and community domains. And from these 3, we think and we believe that the real driver has to be the smart government. We have to enable smart government, number 1, to ensure the economy and communities can be realized and materialized. We do this program not in the vacuum of the needs of the people. I think the previous doctor mentioned about water issues in Selangor. I can guarantee you, doctor, that this is being looked at in the new Smart Selangor Action Plan, because we bring forth 3 main pillars there. One is the long-term state structural plan that the state actually has up to 2035, and we bring forth the needs of the people, asking them what will their prioritization of needs becomes and be, and we use that as a basis for this new blueprint. So there are 60 initiatives in total, and we've got indicators to look at how we perform over the years, and this is how it's structured. So essentially, we've taken and used the Roland-Berger framework to outline the blueprint development, where we kind of like divide the program into enablers on the left and then domains on the right, with a lot of emphasis on enablers. And the key element of that enabler is to enable smart digital infrastructure. And I think this is one of the challenges that we are facing in developing the smart state in Selangor. So basically, if I could quickly just sum up what I mean by smart is essentially comparing these two diagrams. So the one on the left is a conventional situation, call it city, a conventional state, and the smart state or smart cities on the right will be where you are including that digital infrastructure layer. And I think it looks easy from a diagrammatic perspective, but if you look at it on how you do this practically on the ground, I think there are issues, because rest assured that if you talk about smart and smart technology implementation today, the telcos will put their hands up and say, we want a piece of that, because it's a lot of technology, it's a lot of connectivity, network, that's our domain. And I can guarantee you as well, if you use any of them, I think they will not be able to match or meet the requirements of the city managers, people who are being tasked to actually manage the city, and they are the ones who needed this information. They are the ones who needed connectivity to be reliable and affordable at the same time for the different applications that they have. Our challenge so when we build this is the structure of the kind of digital infrastructure that we are building. I think the uniqueness of Smart Selangor is that second layer from the bottom. I have not seen this done in any state in Malaysia, or even the smartest city in Malaysia. What we are building is that application development platform layer, where we will have the ability to fuse data from the different verticals, being the use cases layer at the top, which are used by citizens. I think the key benefit here is the ability to do cross-functional or cross-domain analysis, and I think that's very crucial and very true, because today, people talk about, hey, what's caused that water problem in Selangor? Is it pollutants? Is it enforcement? Is it water? You've got multi-dimension information that you've got to really analyze quickly. And I think by building this layer infrastructure, maybe Korea has a better approach here, but this seems to work for us. And I think it also unties us from this dependency on vendors, because you'll see that the typical approach would be to sub out the development of the apps and applications to vendors. Data resides with them, and whenever you need it to do critical data information, get to critical data analysis, you'll find that you're at the behest of the vendors. They will charge you back for use, right? And if you take that problem in government, and because I talked about enabling smart government as being one of the main things that needed to be done, you will find that you need to break departmental silos. You need to break silos at the federal level. I guarantee ISIS should write a paper on this. You should talk about breaking the silos among ministries, right? I think that's the experience that has been done or being faced by other governments, like take Singapore, for example. I think as you become smarter, these silos have got to come down. Data has got to be shared. So there are issues like that we are solving in the state that would enable, at the end of the day, when all these data from these various domains and facets come into the state. Dr. Lee touched about the need for a command control center. We can show you one we have there. So that's the bottom layer. And I think the reason for that is so that we could create city managers, state managers who are more responsive. They can have more targeted actions. And main and most importantly is to simplify the life of the citizens in the state. No more queuing, no more numbers. You want to deal with the government, look at your handphone, make your payment, that sort. I think that's the future in Selangor. Here are some of the impact that we foresee that's going to get to Selangor in 2025. And I think in getting all this, I think the core of it would be our contribution to the federal government GDP. At the moment, we only contribute about 24%. We want to jack that up to 30%. And agriculture becomes a key component in there. Currently, we're only contributing 1%. We want to jack that up to 5%. and then a lot of it would center around digitalizing our SMEs. I think somebody mentioned about SME and importance earlier. Now we have a platform that we are going to develop these SMEs and create competitive ecosystems for them within the state. So I think looking at the economic productivity targets, I think there's opportunities for Korean businesses. I think number one is, I would say here quickly, urban smart farming becomes very important. As agriculture will be a key contributor there. Secondly, will be the adoption of IR 4.0 technologies for our SMEs. So you're talking about here, probably not like the Hyundai, like the multinationals. We're talking about like micro, even nano SMEs, and the fact that they needed some digitalization to use, as well as IR 4.0 elements if necessary for them to speed up or increase the growth and the production. To the elements on the left, a lot of those crime reduction, public transport, government approvals. I think again here are opportunities if you had similar experiences in Korea, and how you digitalize and make your governments more responsive. That's an area that we think in Selangor is very, very important, and we'd like to explore collaborations there if possible, and all that. And I think the key, so the stuff on the right, environmental. I used to travel to South Korea. I'm very impressed on how you keep your rivers clean, how you manage to even recreate, that Cheonggyecheon, that you recreate a river out of highway. So I think we're very impressed with that. We have explored some potential collaborations with some entities in Korea before in the old prime ministership. I think we are still open to explore that. We have a big river rehabilitation need in the state. And as well as, I think on the water issue side, I think there was a mention about Syarikat Air Terengganu Satu detecting leaks, good for them. We have an issue here in Selangor, which is to better monitor our raw water supply. So basically, how do we monitor raw water on a vast scale in remote areas, so that people don't pollute and that so on. I think it's I like the rivers in Korea, they're very clean and all that. So if there are experiences that we could share there, I think that'd be very key, very useful for the Selangor state government, and I think we will facilitate any entry of foreign companies to help us solve that, including here as well, things like recycling and energy reduction. So here I just want to quickly show you what we have done. So under smart government, we started off with a very tiny command and control center on one level of a public building, basically 2 agencies there. 4 years later, so now we have this bigger version of a command center in the state secretary building. It is going to be a collaborative command center, because I think Dr. Lee also mentioned the need for multiple agencies to work together. So this will be a C5I standard, command control, computers, communication and collaboration, intelligence operation center in the state of Selangor. So I think there'll be good news for Selangorians. Waste management is an area that we have managed to change or rejuvenate. We have a better, nicer looking collection fleets, and I think there's a model, and we monitor operations real time. But we still needed assistance on the recycling. What do we do? What is the future of recycling? I think if there are lessons we could learn from the Koreans, that'd be fantastic. I mean, this is part of the dashboarding that we monitor our collection assets, complaints, and that sort, almost real time on a daily basis. Parking is now in Selangor. There's no more parking with paper or parking with coins. If you still do that, you got to really wake up and smell the future. Everything is done by the phone. Parking's done by the phone. And we try to monitor traffic more intelligently in the state. So beginning to put like intelligent cameras, adaptive analytics to control traffic lights, that sort. But still on a very much pilot level. We appreciate some assistance here as well, if possible. On the economy side, we talk about the cashless initiative. Again, how do we make life easier for the citizens? So today in Selangor, if you wanted to pay for your basic citizen service, you just look at your phone. Again, there is an app. You can make all the payments through the app. This is the SME platform that I talk about. Basically, how do we take our micro and nano SMEs, grow them correctly by monitoring their growth in appropriate marketplaces based on their needs. Okay, and I think more importantly here is the idea, because we want to hit that 200,000 local SME target to be on this platform. I think what we want is to look at which areas within this SME ecosystem that needed to be that requires state intervention to come in and put more more aid or assistance or even development and grow that particular area. Okay, digital infrastructure in the district offices of Selangor. We are already using a gigabit network. So that basically says that 3,000 Mbps connectivity speed for the LAN network. So people can do video conferencing. Very, very useful over this COVID period. People do not need to meet face-to-face anymore. I think public buses that we provide in the state now, you can, there's no more fixed schedule boards of timetables. Everything comes by through your phone. You can look at when the bus arrives, etc. And so you don't have to wait at the bus stop for very long. And I think within communities, we have a collaborative center of excellence here. There was a video, but I think I can come back to that if there's a request later. I'm just sprinting for time. And two things that we monitor in the state actively will be river water quality as well as air quality sensors. We've got about 53 of these units within the state, where federal government only put 7 for us initially. So that's where we are at. That's the website that you need to refer to, and I think I'm happy to engage in any collaborative discussions from now on. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your nice, excellent presentation. This is session. We are just starting the Q&A session. Please, Eric Steiner, could you moderate and manage this session, Q&A session?
Yep, sure. Would love to, Professor Hong. I think just to pick up on what Dr. Fahmi had presented on, I was just wondering if perhaps any of these speakers, especially maybe Dr. Lee, would like to respond to some of the areas where Dr. Fahmi had highlighted where assistance could be beneficial, and whether Dr. Lee sees some areas where Korea can come in and assist in those. I think that should be a good starting point for now. Dr. Lee?
Agree.
You mean me?
Yeah.
Could you ask again?
Oh yeah, sure. Earlier in Dr. Fahmi's presentation, he had highlighted a few areas where assistance from South Korea would be beneficial in Smart Selangor's adventure into developing smart cities and all that stuff, right? I was wondering whether maybe you could help us fill in the blanks where Korea could come in with some examples about what it could be of assistance to Selangor.
Okay. When we constructed the smart city first, we usually more focus on some kind of very nice technology first. That's usually very the shining when you look at the smart city part. And Malaysia already constructed a very nice the center and many different services already have. But probably when you manage and operate your system, you will probably face some kind of the problems. That's usually the first part is the cooperation with the other organization. That's I think you already solved that part. And but just the service chain is not the good strategy to develop the smart city. You need to find out the more services and you need to develop the center and your services. In that case, you need to help with some private sector's part. And at first stage, we are only focusing on the government cooperation, but nowadays we are cooperating with the private sector company. When I showed some presentation, I just fast but the one of my slides that they show that the Hyundai Auto Company working with some other local the governments or the LG CNS or Samsung cooperate with some kind of other local governments. You need to make that kind of some base to cooperate the private sector and the public sector. And the other important thing is that the citizen participation. And when you look at citizen participation, it's not just discussing with the citizen. When you look at the Malaysian the smart city service or the Korean smart city service, the government or local governments can do only or show the data. Showing the data is the last stage. And after the look at the some data, some exact data, citizens need to move. For example, if you use some kind of BIS, bus information system, citizens need to use bus more, right? So how can we participate the citizen more and more will be the another issue. But so the kind of program you will need to make, I think.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Dr. Fahmi, is there any response from your side?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Lee, and thanks, Haris, for facilitating the discussion. I think on the point of the involvement of private sectors, we absolutely welcome that, either at the federal level or even at international level. I think the point number 2 about governance, Dr. Lee's right. The issue is when you have multi-agencies, who controls whom. That's okay, but fortunately in the state, I think for matters under the state, I think we have that under control, although we would appreciate more participation and assistance from the federal government in like the police force or the military and that sort, but I will leave that to ISIS. The last one about citizen participation, this is the point about adoption was very key. Dr. Lee mentioned that, and I think what we have essentially is a digital literacy program. So this is not to make everybody have doctorates like me and Dr. Lee, but just to get them to want to use the applications that we are using regardless of demography, age or race, right? There are people in the rural outskirts, even foreigners, we're asking them to use our apps. So the next time around when you do a tour in Selangor, you'll see QR codes everywhere and can be paid using WeChat, like Alipay or WeChat Pay. So that's what. So I think that's very crucial, very important. What we don't yet have is this Smart City Research Center. We have collaborative centers, and not just for talks and discussion, but again, we're trying to break the silos and the barriers to find an innovative or co-innovate together, government, private sector, academia, local and foreign. And I think that's very key, because I think that discourse about what is good, what is happiness, how do you build happiness and embed that into the technologically built smart state. I think all that has to happen, and I think there has to be a space for that. But we'll get that. I think we're only about 40% into our program, but as we proceed along, and I think this is where the innovations, real true innovation inventions would come in from the state. So thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Fahmi. Just to pick up the conversation from where Ms. Sumati left off early on, right? Ms. Sumati, I think you mentioned something about how the ports are investing more heavily into digitalization and also automation due to the pandemic, right? I was wondering, and you did touch a bit on the need to provide more cybersecurity resilience on those fronts. I was wondering whether you can elaborate on how those current efforts are currently like, and maybe highlight some of the areas where we are lacking, then perhaps have some cross collaboration between the other players here today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Haris, for the question. Moving on to digitalization and automation, it is not only after the COVID or during the COVID pandemic. The process actually started, as you know, the world is moving towards 0.4 and digitalization and so on. So ports were already investing on such concepts and development. However, as I said, we had discussion with the representative from International Maritime Organization and also ports representative of Klang and so on, the whole port. So one area that they think that, in wake of the COVID, the viruses that, the virus that can be transmitted not through humans, but that how it affects the cyber security itself.
Yep.
Ports generally are not really equipped to deal with the cyber security because they are more equipped to deal with automation, for example, in order to reduce labor. In order to reduce labor. So in the time of pandemic, of course, we want to reduce human interactions, and we rely more on automation. So this is one area that needs pressing attention, not only from Malaysia but also in the ports around the world. So resilience against cyber security, not only at ports, but also I think generally in Malaysia, need a lot of attention from global partners. That is my thought. So maybe, as I mentioned, Korea would like to see how those threats are dealt in other ports, including not only Korea, but also the US ports and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mati. Yeah, I think it's to tie everything up, right? All the presentations Ms. Mati presented on ports and maritime security and some of the areas of cooperation, and the other speakers talked a bit about more of the smart city-like developments in their respective areas. But I think one of the areas where we can see a common thread would be data protection, right? And if I may invite each of the speakers to comment a little bit on how do they see data protection being like in their respective areas, and perhaps give us an assessment of how the situation is like today and whether much more is needed and in what form these improvements can take. I think that should be able to fill up the remaining of the Q&A for the next few minutes. Thank you. Let's see. Ms. Sumati, do you want to go first as the first speaker who went earlier?
Sure. So data protection, it's more important now than ever because most industries, be it small or big industry, they are relying on data for small businesses like food delivery, or even when you talk about containers and shippings and so on. And also during the pandemic particular, we are looking at shipment of medical supplies, and the vaccine is ready to be delivered. And I think the vaccine is because it has some characteristics of storage and so on. It is not viable for freight delivery. It is going to be through shipping. So there will be a lot of data need to be shared in the first place in order to deal with this issue. So when you share data, it is vulnerable, for many threats. So I think this is where the governance of data protection is also an area that I think has not been discussed in depth, especially on maritime data protection. And I think one area that we can look for cooperation with Korean government. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Koh, would you like to share your thoughts on data protection, perhaps?
I would like to give us some other comments on my presentation regarding the other related issue, because I make a very short presentation and considering the time limitation. Yeah, actually, it's many of the Korean companies and Koreans, they have less knowledge about Malaysia compared to Vietnam or Indonesia. That's why I showed the investment trend from Korea into the other 3 countries compared to the FDI into Malaysia. So I think is both of countries, the government and the private sector needed to expose the Malaysia to the Korea. So then they have to know how to leverage the Malaysia is a relative position among ASEAN, then which make a help, Malaysia easily become the hub of ASEAN, because Malaysia has a lot of competitiveness in terms of location or connectivity, the upgraded infrastructure and a talent pool, but many of the Korean private sector, they don't have those kind of in-depth knowledge about Malaysia. So I would like to say that and give us some more, they can grab the more chances to use Malaysia as a real hub of ASEAN. So that's why I showed the K-Water and Swingby, because those companies, they would like to expand their market with Malaysia together into the neighbor countries in ASEAN.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Koh. Yeah, I think highlighting the gap in knowledge from the Korean side about what's the potential in Malaysia is quite interesting. I think that's the offer maybe Dr. Fahmi should be taking heed of, for being the only industry player on this panel, right? Okay, yeah, moving on. Dr. Lee, can we hear some of your thoughts about data protection? Perhaps share, because Korea is,
data protection is a very important issue, and the private issue can be another important issue. And in the case of the data protection, anyway, the smart city concept is some kind of interconnected and collaborated, a lot of different fields of data together in one site. Therefore, it is very important to protect the data. In Korea, we have some kind of isolated system in the case of the center to protect the data and to protect some, the private data, the protection. It's a kind of the privacy issue. Therefore, only the center can use their own network in there. So the outside, some people cannot access to the center's data, center's network or center's data. Only the governments or some kind of the police station or fire station, some kind of the public, the organization can access to the center like that. Therefore, we do not have a lot of problem about the protected data. However, the problem is that the sharing data can be another issue, because we protect too much about the data. So we are still considering about how to balance this data protection issue and data sharing issue. So currently, we consider that we protect too much. Therefore, we try to, the Korean policy is to share the data nowadays. However, we still studying which level is enough to share or to protect data. So I actually do not have the nice answer, but what I can do is just we are trying to balancing the protect and the share the data.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Lee. Yeah, I think sometimes implementation is a bit more complicated than the ideals that we can talk about here, right? Dr. Fahmi is the last speaker, and perhaps because we're running out of time, do you want to share some of your thoughts about data protection, what Smart Selangor is doing, and we can conclude the session after that?
Yeah, sure. I'll do this quickly. I like your point, Haris, about implementing it is a different challenge, and I think that is the challenge for us. So So I think there's two buckets I'd like to break this point into. I think one is, if we are talking about data security in terms of the infrastructure required to make data safe, that's one discussion on its own. And I think that is a discussion that in things that we are building at the moment on the infrastructure side. A second, within infrastructure as well, once you've built that digital infrastructure, what would be a usable or reasonable model to facilitate data exchange? You know, I think that's the key. You know, you got to exchange. You know, like Dr. Lee talked about the police needing something, the fire station needing something. Government say everything is sacred, cannot use, right? So that's not the right way forward. You know, I think federal government also must learn from their experiences. So from the point of, like, everything is sacred and nothing is open and should be shared because it has to be safe. Even within governments itself, I think when we approach this at the state level, data is actually classified into many classes, you know. And surprisingly, when we did the exercise in the state, only about 20 to 30% of the state data is highly classified and can't be touched and can't be divulged. The rest are fine, you know, especially when we talk about things for the use in smart cities, you know, bus schedules, where are the buses, where are my garbage trucks, you know, this sort, you know, how many cars on the road. Although when you come to like whose car shouldn't you monitor, that one we can you know, we can censor one, have you for VIPs if you want, but I think on a generic premise, I think it should be open. I think we talked about sharing data as the means for us to create more innovation and to enable smart state, facilitating faster data transfers. I think government should be looking at this as an opportunity to break those barriers rather than, you know, strengthening it and saying we need to have another on-prem data server. Data cannot leave Malaysian shores because et cetera, right? I think that causes problems, because if we talk about on-prem data store, there's no redundancy, you know, there'll be connectivity issues. I think there are infrastructures today that you can use to make that better for the unclassified data that you can share. I think that must come first. Thanks.
Thank you. I think there's a few questions there's one in the chat and one in the Q&A section. But time is running out-ish. Can I just check with Falina whether we can extend for maybe another 5 minutes? Falina.
Hi, Aris.
Hi.
Good. 5 minutes to wrap up the session. That would be great.
Yeah, okay. All right, let's go through this. There's a question from Dr. Hu in the chat. Dear panelists, I also wonder whether coastal cities which are involved in smart cities pilot can be involved in maritime connectivity. For example, Port Klang is in Selangor and Busan, the main port city in Korea, is connected to ASEAN. Would like to hear your thoughts on this. Based on the presentations, I think it's quite relevant to Ms. Sumati. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Okay, as presented by Dr. Fahmi, smart cities case for Selangor State, it is everything from traffic, you know, and also it involves the SMEs and also the community. But maritime connectivity is there's a huge potential because it involves the businesses, and many private sectors can participate. The transfer of goods from bigger ports to inland ports and so on. So I feel that Port Klang, and there is also new ports. It's called the Jajaran ports connectivity from Port Klang connecting to other ports that can support Port Klang's transfers is in the pipeline. So definitely, this is one area that will support the smart city program.
Thank you, Ms. Mati. And I think you've answered the other question from Thomas already in the Q&A section. So there's about 4 questions that has been answered by our esteemed panelists in the Q&A section. So I invite you to read that at your own time if you're interested. And in the interest of time, may I please pass the floor back to the moderator, Professor Hong.
Thank you so much. Thank you, the presenters and the discussant and the audience. All of you Thank you so much. This time is the left up of this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, participants and panelists, for the great discussions in the second session of the day. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the Mask Network event titled 60 Years and Beyond, Preparing Malaysia-Republic of Korea Relations for a New Era. To close the program, we invite His Excellency Lee Chi-bom, Ambassador of the Republic of Korea to Malaysia, to deliver the closing remarks.
안녕하십니까. Thank you, Director Alijan Mahadi. Many thanks to all the speakers and participants for the insightful presentations and wonderful discussions today. Today's Mask Network webinar was indeed a very valuable opportunity for serious discussions on ways to further strengthen the cooperation between Korea and Malaysia, as well as Korea and ASEAN. Your feedback on the new Southern Policy Cross will help to further elaborate the strategy and identify specific cooperation projects. I would like to once again express my sincere gratitude to the Mask Network and the ISIS for the successful event today. The new Southern Policy is a continuous evolving process to build a stronger partnership with ASEAN and the countries in the region. It is not aimed at any particular outcome or a goal in itself. Therefore, the success of the new Southern Policy process strategy hinges on the active participation of the countries involved. Malaysia is a key partner for the NSP Plus, as it was always played a leading role in the region. Malaysia has already made a significant contribution to the NSP, most notably in the recent seminars, book launch, and publication of Focus Magazine special edition by ICS, as well as the policy research by the Institute of Malaysian and International Studies of the National University of Malaysia earlier this year. This input received much attention and appreciation in Korea. I believe that they have already have considerable influence on shaping the strategy for implementation of the NSP Plus and will continue to do so. Likewise, I am confident that today's discussions will also prove to be very useful and meaningful. The Korean government greatly appreciates the enthusiasm and support for the new Southern Policy that you have shown today. We look forward to engaging in interactive two-way dialogues and cooperating with Malaysia and other ASEAN members for our shared mutual goals. Distinguished participants, in the coming new year 2021, COVID-19 will probably continue to pose the greatest challenge and dominate the headlines throughout the world for some time. Many anticipate that we will witness a return to multilateralism in order to combat COVID-19, especially with the new administration in the United States. Many also expect the new Biden presidency to reinstate the pivot to Asia strategy of the Obama administration. In any case, it seems very certain that the importance of Malaysia and ASEAN will continue to grow and be greater than ever. Even with the development and distribution of COVID-19 vaccine, the pandemic's impact on the world will remain with us for some time to come. Malaysia and Korea have both managed the COVID-19 situation relatively well since the early days of the pandemic, and thus are considered as model cases for the rest of the world. I strongly believe that both our countries will lead the world once again in the fight against as well as recovery from COVID-19. I urge all of you to take part in our great journey ahead to bring Korea, Malaysia, and ASEAN even closer together, hand in hand, in a renewed friendship for a new era. The Korean Embassy will always be there with our friends from Malaysia. Thank you. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. We wish to now invite Mr. Shariman Lokman, Fellow Foreign Policy and Security Studies, and also MAS Network member, to deliver the closing remarks on behalf of the Chief Executive.
Thank you, Farlina. It is my honor to deliver the closing remarks on behalf of my Chief Executive, Mr. Herizal Hazri. Mr. Herizal has been called for an urgent meeting in Putrajaya, and he regrets not being able to close this event himself. The key message that he would like me to convey is that he is deeply grateful to the Embassy of the Republic of Korea, especially Ambassador Lee, for their kind support for this event, as well as the Malaysia Scholars on Korea MAS Network. ISIS Malaysia would also like to thank the various moderators and speakers for generating ideas to enhance Malaysia-Korea relations. Additionally, Mr. Herizal wishes to underscore his appreciation to those who have worked hard to put this event together. Among others, they include my research colleague, Ms. Farina Said, and Ms. Atika Isha and her team in the Public Affairs and Conference Services Division of ISIS Malaysia. Now, track 2 diplomacy, like diplomacy at the official level, takes a long time to bear fruit. Not a single event, not even a handful of them, can be expected to have a decisive effect on the relationship. The MAS network was formally launched just over 3 years ago on the 6th of December 2017. And this event has provided a good opportunity to reflect on the 60 years of the relationship and its future. And I must also say that we all probably agree that this relationship hasn't quite reached its full potential, and the MAS network and the events under it is it's an important effort for us to bring that relationship to the full potential. So we can only hope that the ideas generated by these interactions will gradually filter more widely among the various stakeholders of the Malaysia-Korea relationship. ISIS Malaysia therefore looks forward to working closely with the Korean Embassy, as well as all MAS members in sustaining this effort in the long term for the benefit of nations and Koreans alike. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lokman. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the event. We thank you very much for your participation and contributions to the program. Should there be any comments or any thoughts, please feel free to drop a line to myself at farlina@isis.org.my or to my colleague Haris at isis.org.my. We will share it and we will actually respond when possible. So thank you once again, and we look forward to meeting on a future platform on Korea. Have a good day ahead.